Hi, Alessio. Good to see you. We'll thank you for joining. We'll just start in a couple of minutes.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
So it's 3:58 p.m. here in India right now, and the session is scheduled for 4 p.m. And we are all set. And
perfect.
We have a 2.5 hour long session ahead of us. So
yeah,
all the best.
Is there too much background noise? I can close the window if it's too noisy.
Right now, I think it's all right. I don't see a problem here.
Yeah. I might just in case I get a siren go past. I live next to a hospital.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Hey, perfect.
But as I said, thank you so much for having us here and joining in.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. And so how we'll go is we'll just start the session in a couple of minutes. And while we're doing that, I'll also
sorry, Devesh, I seem to have I've lost you there. Just check my connection.
Okay, I'm back. So, okay, it's 4 p.m. I think we can start the recording now, Shivesh. Okay. So, hello and welcome everyone to this event, the Next Genius webinars. This is the Study Medicine Abroad Fair that we are doing in collaboration with the Medic Portal. And first of all, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Alessio, for joining and for agreeing to do this session with us. About a little bit as we go forward, let me tell you a little bit about this event and about how everything is going to happen over the next couple of days. So, and for that, let me just go ahead and share my screen with all of you. So it's just loading. Basically, over the next 2 days, that is today and tomorrow, Friday and Saturday, we have the Study Medicine Abroad Fair. And it's curated in collaboration with the Medic Portal, which is a leading resource for aspiring medics or students who are planning to pursue medicine in college. And Medic Portal specializes in helping students with the UCAT and the BMAT and medical interview preparation. This event is ideal for students who are planning to pursue medicine abroad. Over the next 2 days, here's what the schedule is going to look like for you. So for the next couple of hours, actually, Alessio will be your presenter for the session. And he's going to share with us about the process of applying to the medical school. He's going to share with us about applying to colleges in UK, New Zealand, and Australia. He's also going to share with all of you about how to prepare for the UCAT and the BMAT exam, which are critical for entrance into some of the top schools across the world. Then he'll share with us about the process, the interview process, or the multi-mini interviews, which are very typical, which are very unique to the admissions in medical schools and specifically in the UK. Following that, we'll have a speaker from the US. We'll have Ms. Patricia Hunt joining us from Juniata College in Pennsylvania. And she is going to take us through the pre-med track. That is how the pre-med programs work in the US. Following that, you will listen to student experiences. You will listen to 2 students as they share their experience of studying the BS and MD program at Tulane University and bioinformatics program at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. Then on day 2, that is tomorrow, you will listen to 7 fantastic colleges from the UK, US, and Hungary. So you'll listen to University of Pest from Hungary. That's the first session tomorrow. Following that, you'll listen to the University of the University of Buckingham Medical School. That will be followed by Swansea University. Then you'll have UCLan, that is University of Central Lancashire Medical School, St. James School of Medicine, Brunel Medical School, and finally Juniata College in Pennsylvania. So that's how your schedule for the next couple of days is going to look like. And before we get going, let me just quickly share with you a couple of resources that we have with us for all of you students. Resource number one is our Instagram account, where we have some very fantastic resources for you, where we have some great content for you to help you with your college and admissions. And in the chat, you will see the link for our Instagram account. And the second resource is our YouTube channel, again, where we continue to post lots of amazing resources for you to help you with queries related to admissions or colleges and careers. So I encourage all of you to just check out the link which is posted in the chat box, and just go to our YouTube channel and subscribe the channel so that you can gain access to all the videos or all the sort of relevant information which will eventually help you with your college and admissions. And finally, I think we are ready for the session. And before we get going, let me introduce Alessio to you. Alessio Kenda, he is right now going into his 4th year of medical school at University College London. In his 3rd year, he completed an intercalated BSc in Sports and Exercise Medical Sciences at UCL, graduating with first-class honors. Alessio has worked at the Medic Portal for 2 years, tutoring students preparing for UCAT, BMAT, and the medical school interviews, as well as providing guidance in personal statement writing. Outside of academia, he has volunteered with St. John's Ambulance as an event first aider, and he is a keen hockey player and a runner. It's a pleasure, Alessio, to have you here with us today. We are looking forward to learning all about medical school admissions. And before I pass it on to Alessio, let me make a couple of quick announcements. Number one is the session is being recorded. So of course, if you're here, that's great, but you will have access to these recordings on our YouTube channel, the link for which I just shared. And number two is we'll take your questions towards the end of the session. So you can use the Q&A feature and now feel free to ask questions, and we'll take these questions towards the end of the session. With that, I'll pass it on to Alessio. Alessio, once again, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to learning more about medical school admissions.
Thank you so much, Devesh. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak. And hello from London, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen so we can get our slides up and running. Here we go. Hopefully this is working. Are you guys able to see the slideshow now?
Yes, it's just, yes, we can see it now.
Perfect. Okay, so as I said, welcome from the Medic Portal. We consider ourselves the medical entry strategy experts, having taught over 40,000 aspiring medics from around the world. We're trusted to deliver UCAT prep as well as BMAT preparation over 150 schools in our school courses, and we're official partners of the Royal Society of Medicine in the UK. So we've been around a little while. This is a little bit about myself. I'm Alessio Kenda. Thank you, Devesh, for the introduction. As he said, I'm going into my 4th year of medical school at University College London. I've been with the Medic Portal for 2 years now, having delivered hundreds of hours of UCAT tuition courses, as well as BMAT, interview, and personal statement. So the first hour today, sorry, excuse the sirens. I live between an ambulance depot and a hospital, so a proper medical student in that regard. The outline of today's session, first up for the first hour, is about how to apply to a UK medical school, then talking through European medical schools, followed by medical schools in Australia or New Zealand. And I'm hoping that this should take about 55 minutes to an hour for this first session. Let's begin with studying in the UK. So what are some of the benefits of studying in the UK? Well, all medical degrees here are regulated by the General Medical Council and as a result are internationally respected. Furthermore, many UK universities are world leading in their quality of medical education, and studying in the UK presents a fantastic chance to develop your academic and colloquial English. Finally, the UK is great, lots to see and do on what is a pretty small geographical area. There's historic villages, busy cities, some coasts and dramatic mountains. The UK has it all. As someone who isn't originally from the UK, I've absolutely loved coming here to study. There's a few different routes to become a doctor via medical school in the UK. The first route, and perhaps the most straightforward route, is the undergraduate medicine route. And that's a 5-year undergraduate course, resulting in you qualifying as a doctor, ready to start foundation year training in the UK. The second option here, this is what I'm on at the moment, an undergraduate medicine course with an intercalated BSc. So that's a science degree sort of interspersed within the medical program. So that adds an extra year. It's a 6-year course. The final option is to follow an undergraduate biomedical sciences degree with a postgraduate medicine degree. Now, not all UK universities require a science degree in your undergraduate degree. However, the majority do. Obviously, because you've got an initial degree followed with the medical qualification, that takes a little bit longer. So that's a 7-year process there. So a little bit about application statistics in the UK. So what's the numbers game all about? There's more or less just over 9,000 medical school places on offer in the UK, and universities typically tend to overoffer by about 20%. At the moment, and with the current climate, medicine is far more competitive than ever. There's a chance that many people have been inspired by the COVID effort. However, due to the fall in EU applications, the competitiveness is slightly less so for international students, which is encouraging for you guys applying from India. So there's two sort of avenues that you can take to study medicine in the UK. There's non-private universities and there are private universities. So for example, my university that I study at, UCL, is a non-private university, and actually my background on the Zoom today is of the main quad at UCL. Now, the process for a non-private university is to first of all register with UCAS. So this is the central application portal. There is a registration fee, and the deadline for submitting your medical application is the 15th of October, the year before entry. So for instance, for the current cycle, if you are hoping to gain entry to start next September for 2022 entry, you would need to submit your application by 15th of October, 2021. Medical school courses start late September to early October, and through UCAS on these non-private universities, you can apply to 4 different medical schools and their courses. And then the 5th application that you're allowed to make, you cannot apply to 5 medical schools. So the 5th application is a non-medical course. So lots of students choose to do biomedical sciences, maybe an anatomy course, a biology course, etc. Now, UK medical schools do vary as to which non-UK qualification they will accept. So the best place to look here is to check the individual university websites, or even give them a call and just ask about your specific circumstance. Furthermore, online, the UK National Recognition Information Centre can help with comparing UK to international qualifications. There is also an English language requirement to study in the UK, and many medical schools will expect you to take the IELTS test, and that's the International English Language Testing System. General and academic are the 2 versions of this test, and most medical schools do require a minimum score in the academic component as part of the entry requirements. This is purely because the course is taught in English, and you also start to interact with your patients in English. So it's important to have a sufficient level of English language. Now, a crux of studying in the UK and a crux of the application are the aptitude tests. So these are the UCAT and the BMAT tests. And I'm going to go into a little bit more information about the UCAT and BMAT when we do a sort of 45-minute whistle-stop tour through starting to prepare for these tests. Now, all undergraduate medical programs for non-private universities in the UK use either one of the UCAT or the BMAT test. Great news for you guys that there are testing centres around the world, so do check what aptitude tests are available near you, or work out what the best way to travel to the nearest centre is. COVID has obviously brought about a change into how these aptitude tests are developed, and sitting online has been an option during the pandemic and may continue to be an option in future years. A really great resource that we have on our website at the Medic Portal is a comparison tool for medical schools and explaining how they use the UCAT and the BMAT test, as well as simply which which aptitude tests they require. So I would strongly recommend looking at that tool. Okay, in terms of fees for studying in the UK, unless you are ordinarily resident in the UK, so this means that you would have been settled in the UK for at least through the 3 years prior to beginning your studies, you would be counted as an overseas student. Now, a really important question that we get asked about quite a lot is what the deal is with having a UK passport. Now, simply holding a passport if you live abroad does not mean that you are not an overseas student if you have not lived in the UK for 3 years. Now, fees for overseas students vary by institution, but there may be scholarships or bursaries available. A good resource to look at if you're interested in finding out how funding works could be to visit the British Council website. A little bit more on the financial support available. Now, there's lots of scholarships and bursaries available for international students, and many of these are actually listed on the UCAS website. So if you remember, UCAS is that central portal for the non-private universities in the UK. Now, the majority of scholarships are available for postgraduate or research students, but there are, of course, some available as well for undergraduate study. Funding opportunities are also listed on internationalscholarships.com and the British Council, as I've mentioned already, as well as what is already present on UCAS. Now, another important piece of admin in advance of studying in the UK is, of course, the student visa. So you will need a student visa in order to study in the UK. It's typically called a Tier 4 visa. And to apply, you have to have an offer of study, the required level of English, and to demonstrate you have the finances for your tuition. Application can be 6 months before the start of your course, and it typically costs around £348. Okay. And importantly, you will also need to pay an immigration health surcharge on top of the visa. Now, this is a recurring theme, and you will also need to pay these health surcharges in Australia, for example, as well as in Europe. So we've discussed the non-private universities. However, the UK also has some private universities, and these include UCLan, the University of Buckingham, and Brunel University. A couple of these universities, I believe, will be speaking in other sessions of this webinar series. Now, interestingly, for the private universities, there's no need to apply through UCAS. So essentially, we can consider these as extra applications. You're crazy not to take advantage of these opportunities because UK students can only make 4 applications. International students, meanwhile, can make up to 7, okay, because we can add on these private universities. Now, again, entry requirements vary based on universities, and you may not need to sit the UCAT or the BMAT, but most of these private universities do still require a medical interview. Fees-wise, they're comparable to other medical courses as international students. Now, some other considerations when it comes to studying in the UK. The UCAS portal will require a personal statement. However, unlike in some other countries, these cannot be tailored to different medical schools. So you simply submit one personal statement, and that's seen by all 4 medical schools that you apply to via UCAS. So the important consideration here is to make sure that your personal statement is general enough to appeal to all medical schools with a little bit of a wow factor to appeal to your top choice university. Like all portions of the application, different factors are used differently by the university. So some universities rely heavily on an aptitude test. Some universities like to wait to use the personal statement, and different universities, of course, will have different policies. So it's important to have a look at the university websites and get a feel for what they require in their application. Our medical school comparison tool on the Medic Portal website provides a great opportunity to do this. Furthermore, particularly when it comes to the personal statement and interview, it's important that you reference some work experience, and it's a crucial part of applying to study in the UK. Now, of course, universities will understand that at the moment with the pandemic, it's harder for an international student to gain good work experience in a clinical setting. However, they will take on board any work experience that you may have, and there's lots of opportunities to do some online work experience at the moment, which is quite an innovative way of achieving this end. Okay. So we've gone through a brief overview now of what the application process might look like to study in the UK, be that at a non-private university or a private university. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to break down a case study of the University of Buckingham. And this is one of the private universities in the UK. It's actually the oldest of the private universities. And as I mentioned, and as a recurring theme with medical degrees in the UK, it's recognised by the UK's General Medical Council, the GMC. The medical course at Buckingham is 4.5 years in length, divided into 2 phases. And the exciting thing is that you will be working with patients from phase 1. So that's hands-on experience from the beginning. And in that first phase, it's about building skills and knowledge. The second, again, is about applying that knowledge in a clinical setting. In terms of location, Buckingham's a short bus ride from the history city of Oxford. And importantly as well, there's on-site accommodation guaranteed for the first 4 terms, which is great if you're moving to the UK for the first time. In terms of the admin, as a case study, this is just an example. Now, Buckingham may not be the specific university for you. However, I'm simply illustrating it in today's talk just to give you guys a flavor of what the application processes may look like for individual universities. And of course, most of these details are on the university websites. So if Buckingham is not the one for you and you'd like to look at another UK university, again, the process will be similar, but I'm just giving you a flavor at the moment. For Buckingham, applications are made online through their website, and private universities, so not through UCAS. Academic requirements must meet an ABB level standard in 3 subjects, including chemistry or biology, and then you would also need to investigate how they use equivalent qualifications. Again, there's an English language component, and Buckingham University also requires a medical school interview. For Buckingham, it's an MMI, which stands for a multiple mini interview, and more details on the interview will come later in a designated session before we wind up today. Tuition fees for the next cycle will be £38,000 per year for both UK and their overseas students. Okay, so that was an introduction and an overview of studying the application process to study in the UK. Now we're going to jump across the channel and look at what the process may be like to study in Europe. So obviously Europe, terrific place to be, so much culture, so much history, a great place to study. Now the benefit, one of the benefits of studying in Europe is that plenty of courses in Europe are taught in English, and you get to live and work in some of Europe's most interesting countries and cities, from Nicosia in Cyprus to Italy. And I'm going to go through a case study on a university in Milan, universities in Budapest, or even Latvia and Riga. Studying in Europe as well allows you to be sort of an immersive learner of another language, which is important, of course, because you will actually need to study the local language to interact with your patients as best as you can. Okay. Now, the medical doorway is an important thing to be aware of when considering studying in Europe, because a number of European medical schools use medical doorway to manage applications to their programs, in addition to handling requests themselves. Now, medical doorway is a website online, and it will allow you to fill in application forms for a number of European schools. They will also help arrange for you to take tests as required by the universities. But of course, different tests are geography dependent, as it were. For instance, there are no testing sites in India, and the nearest geographically would be Hong Kong. So travel arrangements would be important there. So the universities which use the medical doorway to help with their application process include Nicosia in Cyprus, several universities in the Czech Republic, Riga University in Latvia, universities in Hungary, Rijeka University in Croatia, as well as Pleven of Bulgaria. Again, similarly to coming to the UK, because the medical course is taught in English in these European courses, they do require a language requirement. So for example, you can see the screenshot on the right here, if I just hover my cursor over it, are the requirements for Riga University if you have not been taught English in high school. So do make sure, if you're considering studying medicine in Europe, you have a look on the university websites and see what level of English is required. As I alluded to before, studying in Europe also brings an additional language requirement other than the English language that the course is taught in, because many courses will also have lessons in the language of the country that you're in. Learning a language as well as medicine is a key part of this course and could be part of the attraction. Of course, learning the local language has obvious practical benefits, like if you go out for a supermarket or a coffee, but will be important for working in clinical settings later on when patients will not be speaking in English. And it's important to be able to build a rapport with those patients. Now, like I did for the UK university when I illustrated the process to apply at Buckingham, I'm just going to quickly talk through a case study for Humanitas University. And here's a picture of the campus there. So Humanitas University is in Milan and is a university dedicated to the life sciences. Its degree course in medicine and surgery, 6-year long, has 180 places and is taught entirely in English. The campus also hosts the Mario Lozzato Simulation Center, which is a state-of-the-art laboratory with simulation centers and cutting-edge anatomical devices. So great resources for a medical student. Importantly as well, a medical degree from Humanitas is internationally recognized, and the course will prepare you for applications for residency in the USA, should that be something that you're interested in. So $20,000 is the fee for the 2021-22 academic year. Now, what is the admin involved in applying to Humanitas University? So firstly, you would register your application directly on their website and create an account on their My Portal. Using their account, you can register for the HUMAT test. Now, this is an aptitude test. It's the Humanitas' bespoke aptitude test for their medical school applicants, testing your scientific thinking as well as your academic literacy. You would then need to take the additional training obligation, which helps the university identify any gaps in your knowledge. Of course, in terms of school level requirements, applicants to Humanitas will require a secondary school diploma or to have attended the last year of secondary education. At Humanitas, there are scholarships available for non-EU students depending on your performance in the HUMAT test, and there are 4 scholarships available per year worth €16,000 paid each year depending on academic performance. Further admin in terms of coming to Italy, you would need to apply for a residency permit, and you can apply for said permit within 8 days of arriving in Italy. You must also present an individual health insurance, and there's a couple of different options to do this here. Okay, again, visas, residency permits, and health insurance is a recurring theme in terms of being an international student and studying abroad, be that in the UK, Europe, or indeed Australia and New Zealand. Okay, so I've been through and talked a little bit about the process studying medicine in the UK. We've been through Europe, and we went through a case study of Humanitas in Milan. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about what it could be, what studying in Australia or New Zealand might involve. So of course, there's a great choice of courses in both of these countries. 5 Australian universities have been ranked in the top 50 medical schools in the world, and these include universities of Sydney, Melbourne, and Queensland. Now, outside of medicine, you also get the benefit of living in a great country with a great quality of life. Important to note in Australia and New Zealand, many of the courses in these countries are postgraduate courses, but some are undergraduate courses and some have assured entry pathways. So do make sure that you know the ins and outs of the individual university that you're interested in. Now, it probably feels like I'm throwing loads of university names at you and I'm talking about all these different application processes. I think it's great that there's so many fantastic medical schools out there, but what that does mean is that when you're considering where to apply, you need to find the university that's best suited to you. Now, of course, the case studies that I go through today may not necessarily be the universities for you, but what I'm doing is I'm giving you a flavor. So in terms of choosing an individual medical school or indeed a country to study in, I would make sure that that's as personalized a decision as possible. Look at the university websites, see if you can attend any online open days, get a feel for the courses, try to figure out which mode of study, which course type might be best for you. I'll give you a little bit more information about that when we talk specifically in detail about the UK application process. However, it's important that this decision is your own personal one. Now, the process to study in Australia and New Zealand is through individual university websites. So international applicants apply to the universities through their websites. Now, for domestic students, so Aussies and Kiwis, there are local services, but they don't apply for the international students. Okay, the language requirements to study in Australia and New Zealand. Now, of course, Australia and New Zealand are both English-speaking nations, so a high level of English is required for courses, using Australia as an example here. However, you will not need to learn an additional language on top because, of course, you'll be communicating with your patients in English. So the exact criteria varies, but an example from the University of Adelaide in South Australia is shown here. Okay, so again, looking to require the IELTS test, and that's perhaps the most universally accepted version of this English language test. Now, in terms of aptitude tests, many universities in Australia and New Zealand require the UCAT, and it's specifically called the UCAT ANZ. But the UCAT ANZ, Australia, New Zealand, is the exact same test as the UCAT used by UK medical schools. So later on today, when we have our introduction to studying for the UCAT and BMAT test, although I'll explain that in a UK setting, the information is transferable to the UCAT ANZ. Now, many Australian and New Zealand medical schools require students to sit this test before making an application. It can be sat in any Pearson VUE test centre across the world, and if sat outside Australia and New Zealand, you can see the fee there on the screen there in Aussie dollars. Importantly, for postgraduate degrees, which are very common in Australia and New Zealand, you may need to sit the GAMSAT instead, and that's just another aptitude test. So you can see on screen here is a list of universities that use the UCAT Australia and New Zealand, and that covers most states and territories across the two countries. So we've got the University of Adelaide, Central Queensland University, Charles Sturt, Curtin University, Western Australia, Flinders University, Monash in Victoria, the University of New South Wales, Uni of Queensland, Tasmania, University of Auckland in New Zealand, University of Otago also in New Zealand, University of Newcastle in Australia near Sydney, and the University of Western Australia, and that one's in Perth. So like I did for Europe and the UK, I'm just going to quickly go through a case study of studying medicine at the University of Melbourne, so in Victoria, southeastern Australia. So University of Melbourne was ranked as the best medical school in Australia by the Times Higher Education Guide, so a great place to study. It's designed for students who have completed an undergraduate degree. It's a 4-year course, blending a mix of practical and academic training, and that tends to be what in the UK we might refer to as an integrated course. Obviously, being in Melbourne, great location on the Victorian coast, being in a vibrant and exciting sort of cultural city. And again, we can see the fees on the screen there. They'll be in AUD, Aussie dollars. So the entry requirements for the University of Melbourne are to sit the GAMSAT or the MCAT if you're an applicant living outside Australia at the time of application only. So if you're a resident in India, you would need to sit the MCAT. Then you would submit your application directly to the university through their website, performing an MMI interview in late September, which can be online for international applicants. Remembering that, of course, Australian academic cycles is on the calendar year rather than September to June. Again, as a becoming recurrent theme, overseas student health cover is important coming to study at University of Melbourne, and you would need to arrange this before you can receive a visa. You can use the University of Melbourne preferred provider, which is Bupa, or your own health cover choice. And of course, once you have been accepted onto a degree and have your health cover, you're able to apply for your student visa to study in Australia. Now, what I've done, we've moved through it quite swiftly, which is great, so we can use a little bit more time to cover the UCAT and the BMAT. Just like to introduce what support we can give you at the Medic Portal. Now, on our website, there's a range of blogs and pieces on applying to universities in different countries. We also offer general advice sessions, and you can see access to these on our websites. And these are ideal for students who would like further guidance on their application, discussing individual medical schools, what might work best for them. And I would really recommend our bespoke package as well. And this is something that I've been involved with, preparing many international students in their applications to the UK and to Europe. So I've taught a couple of students, for instance, applying for medical school from Hong Kong and Singapore on this bespoke package, helping them give themselves the best chance of applying in the UK is what I've been focusing on. Okay. Devesh, we're running slightly ahead of time.
Yes.
However, we'd like to bank some time to spend a little bit longer on the UCAT and BMAT. So we're good to just plow on with the UK.
Alice, just a second. So before we get going, let's just take up a few questions. And once we take up these few questions, then we can go ahead. And I also have a quick poll to run. So I can run that poll. And then we can move forward to the application process, right?
Perfect.
Okay. So I have some questions coming in, and maybe I can just go ahead and read out for you, and then you can answer some of these questions, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first question is residency a part of the UK Medic program?
Okay, so residency tends to be a little bit more of an American phrase, and you watch shows like Grey's Anatomy, and they're the kind of terms that are used in there. In the UK, when we say we have clinical exposure as part of a medical course, so typically you'll spend the earlier years of a course learning kind of what different conditions might be and the biomedical science underpinning medical practice. And then you would spend the later years, we call it on placement rather than on residency. And that's where you are attached to different specialties in a hospital, and you go around for your last 3 years, rotating between specialties, learning on the job and gaining clinical exposure. So I think that perhaps is the best answer to your question. Let me know if there's a follow-up from that one.
Absolutely. I think that answers it pretty well. Thank you for answering that. The next question is, you mentioned about the IELTS and the English proficiency requirements. Now, are there some ways in which this can be waived off for some students? Like if they have taken IB or the Cambridge curriculum in high school, can this requirement be waived off for some of them?
Right. So this is a really good question. And this would require looking at the individual university website, because universities are subtly different in what they require. So I wouldn't want to give a catch-all answer here when it's important to just check the individual universities for their entry requirements. I'm afraid I can't give a more detailed answer to that one, Devesh.
No, absolutely. Actually, that makes sense. Yes, it depends from university to university. So if you're looking at a certain university, and if you are looking at the English proficiency requirement, just check out their application requirements page, and you'll find out whether there are ways for getting your English proficiency requirement waived off. Okay, my next question is, Alicia, is there any minimum age for applying to the universities in the UK, the student is specifically asking if there's a minimum age of applying to University of Buckingham Medical School?
Okay, again, different universities will have different requirements. However, a general rule here is that you would need to be 18 to start a medical program. And this is different from perhaps other university courses. However, due to the patient contact and experience in the anatomy lab, for instance, generally medical schools will require you to be 18 years of age to begin. However, again, it would vary based on individual medical schools. I would say, though, that you would need to be 18 or at least turn 18 very soon after beginning medical school to start the program.
Fantastic. Alicia, can you shed some light on the cost of studying medicine in the UK?
So it's very similar to what I indicated for Buckingham University. And again, individual medical schools are subtly different in the cost, ballpark of around sort of £30,000 per year as an international student. Okay. However, again, this is detailed on the individual university's websites.
Okay, we have one question on the difference between UCAT and BMAT, and that is a question I think let's take up in the test in the test section. Yeah.
Yes, let's do that. Let's do that then.
Okay. A parent is asking, can my child do an undergraduate course after completing IBDP? That's the International Baccalaureate in Australia.
I would imagine so, but again, you would need to look at the individual university's admission requirements. However, the IB tends to be fairly well recognized, so I would be optimistic on that one.
Okay. Yes, that's an interesting question here. Does the same personal statement goes to the university where we are applying for non-medical courses as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks so much for raising it. It's a great one to discuss. So in the UK, when you're applying through UCAS to the non-private universities, as I said, you have 5 application slots. So 4 of those can be used for medical schools. So you have 4 medical school application slots, and then the extra one can be used as a 5th choice. So that's typically going to be a biomedical sciences degree, so something non-medical. And because it's the same UCAS portal and the same personal statement that goes to all of your universities, yes, the non-medical course option does receive that personal statement. However, applying for a course like biomedical sciences or similarly some allied science degrees to medicine, these universities will be very used to receiving medical personal statements, and they would encourage applicants who are initially thinking medical school to also apply to these courses because they know that they're going to be academically capable and keen to be involved in the material. So this is something not to be alarmed by, and it's something that these universities tend to be quite used to.
Fantastic. Can you take us back to that one slide where you mentioned the years, like the duration of the program? It was in the very beginning.
Yes.
The different kinds of 3 tracks.
Yes. So perhaps let me take you. I can indeed take you back. What I'll do is I'll go to. Is this the one you're after?
Yes, this is the one. Yes. Can you just
yes.
practice? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to talk through this one again. So these are the 3 main routes to studying in the UK. So school leavers who simply go into an undergraduate medicine program, that will typically take 5 years. So a good example of that sort of course might be St George's in London. Undergraduate medicine with an integrated BSc. This is what I'm doing at the moment at UCL. So this is, I started university on this course directly after leaving school, so undergraduate. And in my 3rd year, so last year, I did the intercalated BSc year. And this is similarly offered at many medical schools up and down the country. In London, other ones that include it are King's, Queen Mary, where it's optional, and Imperial as well. Where you're not looking for an undergraduate route, the postgraduate medicine route begins with an undergraduate degree, typically in biomedical sciences. However, some universities, for instance, Swansea in the UK, don't always require a science degree. And then most undergraduate degrees in the UK, at least, are 3 years long, and then postgraduate medicine tends to be 4 years. Would you like me to cover anything else on these?
I think that's perfect. And there are many more questions coming, but a lot of them are about the application process. So I think we would be okay to move forward to the next part. And before moving forward to the next portion of the presentation, I have a few quick poll questions for all of you. So I would just appreciate if you could answer this poll. My question number 1 is, when you are watching these webinars, how is your engagement? So I'm just launching the poll right now. And if you could just answer the poll, do you listen attentively and make notes, or do you ask questions as well, or something else? Okay. Fantastic. Just 5 more seconds before we close the poll. Okay, that's great. Thank you. That's my question number 1. My question number 2 is coming up right now. How did you get to know about the Next Genius webinars? Actually, how did you get to know about the Study Medicine Abroad Fair? I think that would be a more reasonable question to ask. Okay, I can see a lot of you have already answered. I'll just wait another 5 seconds before I close this poll. Okay, just sharing the results with all of you. So majority of you got to know about it through your counselor or your teacher. Fantastic. My 3rd question is coming up, and that is, which of these online platforms do you use most frequently? And you can mark multiple answers. So mark all of these which is relevant for you. Okay, just 5 more seconds. Okay, thank you so much. And it's evident that a lot of you are there on WhatsApp. Thank you so much. And that brings me to my final question. And that is, where would you like to pursue your undergraduate medical or medicine studies? And here is it. Okay, another 10 seconds before closing. All right. So it's US or UK, that's number one. And then some of you would like to study that in Europe. Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. It was a pleasure to know more about your preferences. And with that, we're coming towards the end of the first part of this fair. Thank you so much, Alicia, for sharing this. We would stop the recording now for this session and we'll resume the recording in a couple of minutes. So thank you so much for this first part. Okay. Okay, so let's start the second part's recording, and thank you everyone for staying here. And we'll learn more about the next part, that is applying to the colleges in UK. So let's start. Okay, thank you so much, Alicia, for joining, and let's begin the second part of our webinar, and that is learning more about applying or the application process for the colleges, medical colleges in the UK. Over to you.
Terrific. Thanks, Devesh. So it's great to see so many students interested in coming to the UK to study medicine. Certainly my personal experience has been a really positive one here. Now, the journey to medicine in the UK, so typically begins from early on in high school, so gaining an insight and thinking that this might be the sort of thing for you. Age 16, 17 is typically when students sit the UCAT test, so at the end of the second last year of high school, and then early on in their final year of high school, students will sit the BMAT exam. So the UCAT and BMAT, as I've alluded to previously, are those two aptitude tests that most UK universities require. And then, of course, in the final year of school, so age 17, 18, is all about the UCAS application and interviews for medical school, and then hopefully performing well in end of school exams, converting those offers into places, and starting at medical school, which is the main goal. So just to recap, the key checkpoints in that timeline are all about gaining and developing an insight into medicine, sitting the relevant aptitude tests, strategically submitting the UCAS application, and passing the interview stage. And I will say from my personal experience that the process is quite standardized in the UK. It's fairly well laid out, and there's such a great variety of different medical schools in the UK. So you really are a little bit spoiled for choice. And as a result, personally, something that I found quite difficult was narrowing down which ones I would be most interested in applying to. So coming back to this strategic application is really important. And I'll, throughout today, be sort of peppering in some anecdotes to hopefully help you guys in making sure that your application can be as tailored to yourself and as strategic or specific as possible. So those first 3 points there, developing your insights, that could include work experience and reading, etc. Those aptitude tests, UCAT, BMAT, and then the application, which includes a personal statement, is all geared towards securing an interview. And once you've got the interview, it's about securing an offer. Because the university will then say, for instance, if you're an A-level student, that you would need to get an A star and 2 A's at A-level after the interview, and then you've got a place. So you need to meet their offer. So for the application statistics in the UK for entry into medicine at the end of next month, so 2021, you can see that there's been a big increase in local applicants, so UK students applying. There's been a decrease in EU applicants, and there's also been a slight increase in the non-EU applicants. But overall, we can see that medical courses in the UK are under high demand, and there's a 21% increase this year, which is exciting that so many people are considering this career, but also means that we need to make sure that our applications now are as top-notch as they can possibly be. And I'm going to help explain how to do that a bit today. So we alluded at the end of last session and in the Q&A to some of the different pathways into becoming a doctor in the UK. Now, there's undergraduate routes, and many of these undergraduate universities also offer postgraduate medicine. Some universities, like Swansea and Warwick, you can see there, are postgraduate only, and some are international only as well. Okay, and you can see the big blue dot here is London. So this is just to illustrate that there are 5 medical schools in the London area. So you can see I'm at UCL here in up in North London around there. Okay, so as you can see as well, lots of universities spread up and down the country, plenty of choice in the UK. Perhaps the hardest thing is actually choosing a medical school. And remember, through UCAS, you can apply to 4 medical schools and then 1 fifth choice, so non-medical alternative course. So for example, a biomedical sciences, an anatomy course, etc. You can select up to 4 medical schools, as I've been explaining here. If you're considering Oxbridge, importantly, you are only allowed to apply to one of Oxford and Cambridge in your application. And you would need to make sure that your application is strategic. So the great thing about the UCAT aptitude test is that you sit it in the summer, the UK summer, before you apply for medical school. As soon as you come out of that test, you get your score. Different universities will use that score in different ways. So knowing your score, coupling that with how the universities use your score, allows you to be strategic, because you can look to see if your score in a normal application year is high enough for a place at, say, Cardiff, which is a UCAT school, or if the UCAT doesn't go as well as you planned, you may look to apply to a school that places less emphasis on the UCAT, or indeed you may then start to look at the BMAT exam. And of course, that one alternative course will be something medicine or science related, because remember, they will be receiving that same personal statement. And we had a great question on that come up in the Q&A. A top tip from us is to avoid choosing more than 2 BMAT universities. So BMAT is the other aptitude test that some universities require, and you will not receive your BMAT score until after you've submitted your application. Indeed, you submit your application before you even take the BMAT test. So it's a little bit of a gamble. And if you've got a strong UCAT, we would recommend that you make sure that you've got some really strong UCAT requiring medical schools on your application form, because you'd want to just guarantee a place somewhere for medical school. Now, a little bit more on UCAS. So unless you're applying to a private university in the UK, all applications are made through the central UCAS system. And this is the portal on which you can select the medical schools you wish to apply for and submit your personal statements. Remember, it's one UCAS application that goes to all 5 of the universities, 4 of whom are going to be medical schools. The tests and interviews are arranged outside of UCAS. So the tests would be the UCAT and the BMAT, and the interviews, you will receive an invitation to interview from the individual medical schools. And in a normal year, they would be on university campus. Of course, COVID has thrown that into disarray, and there's now some options to do online interviews at the moment. The offers and the sort of accepting or sadly rejection will all go through the UCAS website. And in my experience of using the UCAS website, very easy to use and provides good feedback from the universities as well. So the course structure in the UK, there's essentially 3 types of medical school programs in the UK. There's traditional medical courses, which means that in a 6-year undergraduate course, or a 5-year undergraduate course, I should say, you would normally spend the first 2 years learning the basic science. It's a little bit biomedical science with an applied theme, because obviously you're looking to use that knowledge in clinics. So the first 2 years is all about learning kind of the underlying science. And then the later years, so typically the final 3 years, will be all about being on hands in the clinic and learning clinical skills, learning on the wards, and sort of learning on the job as a sort of medical apprentice almost. An integrated course, again, covers the same points, but they will start and this integrated approach of having clinical exposure and hands-on experience much earlier than your out-and-out traditional course. In terms of the problem-based learning courses, so this is used, for example, at Queen Mary University or Barts in the London Medical School. And this is all about, rather than having a more traditional lecture-based style of teaching, in these programs, students will be divided into small groups with a facilitator working through, for example, a patient case and having to almost find the information and work it out for themselves. So teaching quite a practical approach and relying heavily on problem solving. Now, of course, problem-based learning may not be for you. Indeed, a traditional course may not be for you, and an integrated course may not be for you. But one of these 3 courses, when you have a look at the ins and outs of how they work, one of them is certainly going to appeal to you, and maybe 2, 3, or all of them will as well. So it's important when you're applying that you make sure you're applying to a university that's teaching in a way that you think is going to give you the best exposure. The personal statement we have mentioned a couple of times already today, and that is, of course, a key part of the UCAS application. Importantly for you, it's your first point of interaction with the university. It's only 4,000 characters long, so not even a word limit, characters. And that typically comes in about 1 page of typed A4 or around 500 words. The personal statement is often a great springboard that they use in medical school interviews. So you could sit down at an interview on the table, and the interviewer across the way may have a copy of your personal statement in front of you, and we'll use that as a springboard for discussion, asking about asking about the work experience that you reference in your personal statement, asking about some academic performance that you might reference, any sport, music, or drama that you talk about where you evidence your teamwork and your leadership skills. Of course, the personal statement is personal, so it's important that that you write it from the heart, as it were, and include things that are as tailored as possible to yourself, because you're trying to sell you as someone that the medical schools are going to want on their courses. Of course, it's important to make it stand out as well. And from my personal experience applying in the UK, I think that personal statement is a really tough document to write, because there's so many great things that you think you need to say, and you want the universities to know about you because you're desperate to try and want to study there. And it's a very tricky document to write. And indeed, when I've helped students through the Medic portal writing their personal statement, we often need to go through multiple drafts, and we're sounding out different points. So it's quite a tricky part of the application, but a very important one. Looking at the mechanics of the personal statement, it can typically be broken down into 3 core components. So the first bit is all about your motivation. Why is it that you want to study medicine? And there's loads of reasons why. So it could be that you are looking for a job that is a nice blend of scientific knowledge as well as personal interaction. You may have had a specific exposure to medicine. As long as it's personal to you, that's what the universities are after. Now, exploration is a really important part of the statement. And this is really the meat of the statement. And this is where you explain to the universities what you've done to harness that initial desire to study medicine. And you talk more about what you've done to learn about what a career involves, and how do you know that what you're going into and what you're signing up for is something that you're really keen to do. So the best way of illustrating exploration is through talking about work experience. So for example, if you were able to shadow a GP in a general practice clinic, did you attend some online work experience over COVID? Have you been reading around medicine? Have you been following some medical journals? Have you read any great books? For example, Paul Kalanithi's When Breath Becomes Air. Books by Adam Kay are fantastic as well. So what have you done to explore more about what a career in medicine might involve? Have you spoken to doctors, medical students, etc.? And then finally, the final kind of main component of the statement is your suitability. So this is where you illustrate to the university why you're a great fit to study medicine. So that could be your academic suitability, having performed well on Olympiad challenges, being exceptional performance at school, etc. However, whilst academic suitability is important, as it is for all university degrees, medicine has the extra component of requiring sort of non-academic suitability. So how can you evidence that you're great at working in a team? Have you been playing in a sports team? Have you been part of an orchestra, part of a drama group, for instance? How have you been able to show that you're a great leader? Did you take on and actively arrange and show commitment to a volunteering project, which shows how you might be committed to a research project in a hospital, etc.? So the suitability is also a very important part of the statement. So we've talked a little bit about the UCAS application, which includes that personal statement. And then typically in the summer of your penultimate year of high school, going into your final year, so when you're 16, 17, you would need to sit the UCAT test. So at the moment, I'm helping students preparing for their UCAT exam that they're taking this summer in advance of submitting their applications in October of this year. Now, the UCAT stands for the University Clinical Aptitude Test, and it is required by the majority of medical schools. This test is a 2-hour computerized test, so it's quite different from any other test that you guys have probably taken at school, in that it's all sat on a computer, and it's entirely actually multiple choice as well, which is quite different from your regular school exam. To give you an idea of the dates that this exam is typically sat in 2021, there was a shorter window to what it is normally. So bookings were open from the 26th of July to the 29th of September. And the UCAT can be taken in test centers in over 100 countries, or indeed during COVID, there was the option to sit the test at home. We don't know how that's going to carry over into future years. Importantly, your school doesn't help you with the UCAT. You must register and sit the test independently. And even though you can choose when you sit the test, and different students will sit the test at different times, Don't be worried that sitting the test earlier or later puts you at an advantage or disadvantage. What the UCAT people do is create this massive database of UCAT questions. And when you sit into the test, you almost get your own personalized test coming from that database. So every test is subtly different. The UCAT can only be sat once per year though. So that score that is generated as soon as you come out of the test and that you would use to then make your strategic application, more on that point later, is that for the cycle. Were you to reapply the following year, you would need to retake the UCAT test. Okay, talking also about the BMAT. So the UCAT is required by the vast majority of medical schools in the UK. However, there are some universities, for instance, UCL, where I'm studying, that require the BMAT test. And this stands for the Biomedical Admissions Test. Different to the UCAT, it's a 2-hour pen and paper test, combining knowledge and aptitude, whereas the UCAT is sort of raw aptitude. The BMAT also has a scientific knowledge component, with section 3 of the BMAT also including an essay question. And this is all about focusing on using logic and applying existing knowledge to difficult situations. Like the UCAT, the BMAT is an aptitude test ultimately designed to try and find the best potential doctors. And the test is divided into 3 sections. So section 1, all about critical thinking and problem solving, it's an hour long. The section 2, which is half an hour, is all about scientific knowledge and application. And then section 3, another half-hour section, is a very short essay all about showing how you can structure a logical argument. Now, again, the UCAT here and the BMAT, they're tricky tests to prepare for, and they do require time and specific focus on those tests. I certainly know from my experience and having prepared students for both of these aptitude tests through courses and individual lessons, that students will typically find one of them easier than the other. The UCAT in particular is quite abstract and does require a lot of practice to get used to. However, typically you can't avoid not sitting both of them. Some students choose to only take the UCAT. However, the majority tend to go for the BMAT and the UCAT in my experience. So all of what I've talked about so far, the UCAS application coupled with the aptitude test, is designed to go to the universities for them to then review all of the applications, and then they will start calling applicants for interview. Now, once you get into the interview, everything else is sort of parked behind, and the focus is now purely on how you perform in this interview. Now, again, we see this map of all the different medical schools in the UK, and we can see some nice color coding as well. So the blue universities are those that have required MMI interviews, and those are those multiple mini interviews. Essentially functions a little bit like speed dating. So what you'll be in a room that's split into cubicles, making a circle around the room, and in each cubicle there'll be an examiner, and you simply go on a rotation around those cubicles, having a short interview with the examiners in each one. It's exhausting, but what it's meant to do is to simulate what it would be like as a doctor, moving through a ward round, talking to individual patients in the beds around the ward and in the hospital, and preparing you for that sort of scenario. It's also very similar to how medical school's exam work, certainly in the UK at least. So the MMI will have different stations testing different areas. For example, there may be one on data interpretation, there may be one discussing your work experience, an ethical dilemma. However, we'll cover the details of those stations a little bit more later on when we talk about the interview in more detail. Other universities you can see indicated in red here, a panel-based interview, and this is what you would consider to be your more traditional style of interview, where you sit at a table and you have, for instance, 3 professors or doctors across the way from you, and they pose you questions based on your personal statement, your application, trying to find out more about you. It's the sort of the classic job interview style of setup. However, of course, this is for medical school. In yellow as well, we can see Edinburgh, who use an assessment day. Okay, so just to talk another quick overview of these different interview types. So panel interviews are typically 15 to 30 minutes long. And depending on universities, of course, you'll typically have 2 to 5 panel members made up of admissions tutors, doctors, university staff, medical students, or some lay members of the public. And they'll typically be professionals like for example, some teachers, for instance. I certainly was interviewed by a teacher in one of my medical school interviews. The MMI, you can see I hinted that you would move between these different stations. So we can see different cubicles set up all around the room, and you'll start, a buzzer will go, you'll read the scenario, go in, have the interview, next room, another buzzer, and you continue going around the room like that. So an MMI interview involves typically 5 to 10 stations in this cycle around, with the stations normally being 3 to 10 minutes in length. So these are focused, shorter interviews looking at a specific facet of your application or a specific skill that they want to assess. And what they're going to do is combine traditional questions, for instance, based on your personal statement or your work experience, with MMI specific skills. So this is where they can bring more data interpretation into it, discuss an ethical scenario in a little bit more detail, or they may ask you to watch a short video of a doctor communicating with a patient, and you may have to critique the doctor's communication skills. Oxbridge interviews as well, slightly outside of the box. These are similar to panel interviews. However, Oxbridge are very traditional courses, and they require a strong scientific foundation, and that's embedded in their courses as well. So the interviewers, I should say, will mainly be scientists rather than out and out clinicians. And Oxbridge like to ask these lateral thinking questions. So what they try to do is mimic a mini tutorial, which is the style of teaching at these universities. And there are, of course, subtle differences between Oxford and Cambridge. So we can see this quote here. So what they're looking for is your ability to see both sides of an argument, think on your feet, explain your views to others, and present information and cope with pressure. When it comes to preparing for interviews, there are a few sort of key areas that may come up, and it's important to have an idea of typical questions that may be involved in each of these different facets. So universities may be interested in hearing about your motivation for medicine. And often this can be sort of you explaining why you want to be a doctor. So that's a classic question. They may sit down, they'll say good morning, good afternoon to you, and then they might informally ask, oh, so why medicine? And it's important to have a solid answer to that, because of course, that's the point of being in the room with them. Universities will also be interested in asking about your work experience and insight. What insight have you already obtained into a career? And I hinted that that could be through any reading that you've done, work experience, volunteering. So for instance, in the lead up to my application, I was, so prior to sort of considering medicine, I was volunteering in a local primary school, teaching phonics reading to young students. And then later on, I actually did some volunteering in a care home as well. So these volunteering experiences also give you a terrific insight into what a career in healthcare as a health professional may involve. The medical schools may ask you questions relating to professionalism. So they may present ethical scenarios, or they may show you a video, an excerpt from a consultation. You may be asked to discuss how well or poorly the people in the video may have performed there. They may assess your empathy. But again, typically this will come under an ethical scenario. You may be asked to explain or teach something. So a classic MMI station might be that you come into the scenario and there's a person in the room who you are told has a hearing difficulty. And you may need to explain to them how to play noughts and crosses, for example. So quite a simple game. And you would need to take and adapt your communication for somebody who is hard of hearing. And this is not only testing your problem-solving skills, it's testing your communication skills, how you empathize and sympathize with that person, as well as how good you are at explaining. So you can see that they're throwing some pretty unfamiliar circumstances at you. Breaking bad news is also a critical station in interviews. And of course, we can see how doctors in their professional lives often have to break sort of sad, unfortunate news to families. So a typical MMI scenario might be that you come into the room and you're told that, for instance, the man or the lady in the station has recently lost their dog. And for instance, you may be the friend who ended up losing the dog for them, and you would have to break the news to that particular person. Again, testing your communication, how you show your empathy, problem solving, coming under this breaking bad news umbrella. Ethics, really common as well. They may ask you for your opinion and whether you know debates around organ donation, assisted dying as another one as well. any current affairs. And this is really important if you, regardless of what country you're applying to university, if there is an interview for those medical schools, knowing about the current affairs and the way that the healthcare systems work in different nations is really important. So speaking about the UK specifically, because this is what this section is all about, it's important to know what are the current big topics in healthcare. Obviously, at the moment, the world is swamped by COVID-19. However, in previous years, in the UK, we've had junior doctor strikes, we've had the Charlie Gard case, the Bawagaba case, etc. So it's important to be aware of what is going on locally in that country in terms of health news. And stemming on from that as well, you would need to know what it would mean to be a doctor in that nation. So in the UK, most medical professionals work for the NHS, which is the National Healthcare Service. You would need to know that this is free at the point of care. It's a public health service. And this is, of course, what you're training to enter. So it's good to have a good understanding. It's important to have a solid understanding of what it would mean to practice as a doctor in these various countries. I've alluded to this already, but interviews will also involve problem-solving elements. They may ask about your teamwork and leadership, and this could be previous situations that you've been in where you've developed teamwork and leadership skills. I mentioned playing sport, being a part of a drama group, playing in an orchestra, etc. Reflection is really important. This is an overarching theme that they would like you to evidence through other MMI stations as well. So when you talk about your work experience, it's all about how you reflect on those experiences and how you can relate back to the interviewer those experiences reinforced, for instance, your wish to study medicine. Now, of course, it's important to know about the individual medical schools and their training pathways. So for instance, applying to UCL, I've made sure that I knew what it would mean to be a student at UCL. And as a medical student at UCL, we're lucky we've got our own medical student union called RUMS, which stands for the Royal Free University College Middlesex Medical Student Association. That's an amalgamation of all the hospital sites. And that is essentially a sort of student group, as it were, that we can play sport there. They have music groups, and it's a really great thing as a medical school, as a medical student. And different medical schools have different perks and different things that they offer, which is important to be aware of, because you'd ultimately like to show to the interviewer why you would be a great fit for their university. Okay, so this is winding up from this section as well. But just before I do wind up, I'd also just realized I've forgotten this final point here, training pathways. It's important in the UK that you have an idea of what the training pathway is, because different countries have slightly different routes out of medical school in terms of qualifying fully as a doctor and going through your specialist training. So in the UK, you typically finish medical school and start a foundation year 1 job, okay, which is your first year out of medical school, followed by foundation year 2. And then you typically choose what stream of medical practitioner you might like to be. Do you want to be a surgeon? Would you like to go into a medical specialty like dermatology, for instance? Or would you be more interested in becoming a general practitioner? So there's kind of 3 strands coming out of the UK. So a typical interview question may be that they say, where do you envisage you might be in 10 years' time? And you could speak about where you might like to be in that training pathway, for instance. So just to recap, what is the journey into medicine when we're specifically looking at the UK? Prior to the age of sort of 16, 17, and indeed at that age as well, it's all about gaining your insight, work experience, volunteering, reading around the subject. Then aptitude tests come into full swing. The UCAS application is launched, securing some interviews, and then in an ideal world, converting all of those interviews into offers and then being spoilt for choice as to which medical school you can choose. Right, Devesh, again, so moving a little bit faster through these, just so I can spend a little bit more time on this section. The UCAT and the BMAT is quite important, but I'm more than happy to take any questions now before you'd like to move on.
Yes, absolutely, Alicia. There are many questions that are coming up. And before actually moving to the questions, I have a couple more poll questions for all the people who have joined us. And I'm just going to put forward a couple of polls that we have. And all of you can see the question on your screen right now. Which city are you joining us from today? So are you joining us from Mumbai or where are you joining us from? Please answer this question. Okay, another 10 seconds. All right, thank you. And just to show it to you. Okay, that's one. And my next question coming up is, which grade are you in right now? Okay. Yes, another 10 seconds before I end the poll. All right. So here are the results. Thank you for answering the polls, and we'll take up some questions right now before moving on to the overview of preparing for the UCAT and BMAT exams. So LSU, the first question is, while they are selecting the colleges in the UCAS portal, can they apply to 2 medical schools, 2 medical programs, 2 dentistry programs, and 1 non-medical program as well?
Devesh, yes, you can. However, I would recommend making a choice between medicine or dentistry, because remember that all 5 of those universities will receive the same statement. So it's important that where you might be advertising that you'd like to pursue a career in medicine, the dental school might read that and see, I'm not entirely sure they want to study dentistry. Equally, if you mention lots of dental anecdotes, the medical schools may view that slightly strangely as well. Logistically, it's possible. However, practically speaking, I would recommend making a choice between medicine and dentistry, both terrific career pathways. And actually, I actually considered being a dentist for a while as well. So I do appreciate that choice.
Fantastic. My next question is about the admission rates. So how difficult or how easy or how is the admission rate for international students when they're applying to colleges in the UK?
Oh, this really varies based on the universities. So I couldn't quote exact numbers purely because it does depend on the different universities. As a general rule, it is more competitive for international applicants than local applicants. And this is because UK medical schools have a quota on the number of international applicants that they can accept. And this is because they need to be training doctors who are going to stay in the UK and who are going to work in the National Health Service. So typically that quota is 7.5%. So as a little anecdote for international students, it is worth also looking at the cohort sizes of the different year groups in these UK universities, because obviously bigger universities, for instance, some of the London ones, Manchester, are able to, of course, take on more students, which in turn means they can have more international places. And typically it's 7.5% of the intake is the typical quota.
Okay, got it. Perfect. LSU, is the fee structure different for UK passport holders as compared to international students?
So the fee structure would depend on whether or not you're classified as an international student. So again, you would need to make sure that you fulfill the requirements of being classed as a local student. And if you are a local student, as in most countries, the fee structure is different to international students. But that would depend on whether, for example, you've lived in the UK for the past 3 years. So simply holding the passport, as I mentioned in the first session today, is not enough to class as a local student in the UK.
All right. Let me see if there are more questions. Okay. I think there are many questions coming up on the tests, on the UCAT BMAT. So I think we'll take that part in the next section. So with that, I think we can end this part of our presentation and move forward to the next part. So we'll stop the recording for this part. Okay, so, and in a second, we'll just start the next portion of our session. Thank you so much, Alessio, for sharing with us the information on the application process. And let's move forward to the next portion of our event today, and that is learning more about the UCAT and the BMAT exams, understanding the differences between them, and also learning about how to prepare for these exams more effectively. So passing it back to you, Alessio now.
Great. Well, thank you for staying with us this morning, everybody. So what we've been through already is we've talked a little bit about an exposure to what it might involve to study medicine in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand. We've then looked specifically at the UK application process. We talked about UCATs, for instance, in the personal statement. And when we went through the UK application process, obviously a theme that I kept mentioning was this UCAT and the BMAT. So what are these beasts, as it were? So this journey into medicine that we've been through already involves sitting 2 aptitude tests. The UCAT, typically around the age of 16, 17, and the BMAT around the age of 17, 18. You can only do these tests once per application cycle, and they are only valid for 1 application cycle. Okay, so this is what we're referring to here. Now, whenever I'm teaching a course or speaking with individual students, some of the students ask me, you know what, why is it that we need to do aptitude tests? And ultimately what they're designed to be is fairer than school exams like the A-levels or the IB, and they test aptitude as well as your application of knowledge. So it's looking for some raw skills as well. Ultimately, although it may be slightly difficult to see this initially with some of the tests, they are designed to try and find the best potential doctors. And these aptitude-based skills that they test in these exams are mirroring the raw skills and aptitude that you would need in your daily life as a doctor. So as we go through these tests, I'll start to give you a flavor of why these skills may be transferable to a career in medicine. So another question that comes up, and we've started answering this already today, is who uses what. So you can see the universities in the UK indicated by blue here use the UCAT test. So you can see Aberdeen, Dundee, St Andrews, Edinburgh, Glasgow, all in Scotland requiring the UCAT, right down to Peninsula, Exeter, Southampton, Kent Medway as well in the south of England. In London, King's, George's and Queen Mary require the UCAT, and you can see the vast majority of UK medical schools need this UCAT test. Essentially what that means is that you can't avoid taking the UCAT when you're applying to study in the UK. In red, we can see the BMAT schools. So for instance, UCL there, Brighton, Sussex, Lancaster, Leeds, all requiring the BMAT. So this is another summary table of the universities who will require the UCAT test. So for undergraduate medicine, you can see there's quite a comprehensive list, and this covers most of the students here. For graduate entry medicine, remember we talked about the different pathways to studying medicine in the UK. You have that undergraduate route of 5 years, or the graduate entry medicine route, which is typically a 4-year course following an undergraduate degree. So you can see for the graduate courses in Birmingham, Queen Mary, Hull, York, Sheffield, King's, Southampton, Newcastle and Warwick, you would also need the UCAT test. We've had a question come in already about dentistry, and some dental schools in the UK do also require the UCAT test. So the UCAT stands for the University Clinical Aptitude Test, and this replaced the UK CAT in 2019. So that used to be called the United Kingdom Clinical Aptitude Test, and this is because the UCAT has since gone global. And as we mentioned already, for example, there's now the UCAT ANZ, which is required by Australian and New Zealand universities. A good disclaimer to say now is that the UCAT ANZ is exactly the same test, it's the same form of test as the UCAT in the UK. So for those of you who might also be considering studying medicine in Australia, this is also a relevant exam. Okay, the UCAT is of course required by the majority of medical schools, and certainly pretty much all students who I've helped with their applications and who I've tutored with the Medic Portal have taken the UCAT test. It's a 2-hour computerized test, typically sat in test centers. Now in the 2021 cycle, the current cycle, which is what my students are doing at the moment, there's the option to sit the test online. We don't know how that's going to continue to be rolled out, or if indeed it will be continued to roll out next year. Students have to register and sit this test independently, and it can only be sat once per year, and it's only valid for one application cycle. So you can't take the UCAT early, as it were. You have to take the UCAT in that sort of summer before you launch your UCAS application. Coming in to do the UCAT in a test center is quite similar in the UK, at least, to driving theory tests, in that it's a public test center. So not everybody in the room with you will be taking the UCAT. There'll be people doing, as I say, driving theory, English language tests, etc., etc. So the key dates, of course, what I've given here are the 2021 dates. However, these tend not to change so much year on year. So you would typically register and create your account to take the test in early June, before booking goes live at the end of June. And testing dates, this year at least, ran from late July to running until late September now. Now, this is a narrow window to what it is. Normally, typically testing starts a little bit earlier in July. And of course, testing dates may vary by center based on access and demand. So testing centers in India may have a narrower booking, or a narrow testing window, I should say, for instance. Now, an extra consideration here with the UCAT is because you register and take the test independently. It's important, obviously, to register early because you would like to get the booking for the exact date that you would like. But because you can choose when you take the test, you have a little bit of freedom here as to designing a schedule and planning your revision and test day in a manner that you think is going to give you the best result. So you would obviously need to consider any summer commitments. Do you have a part-time job in the summer, for instance? Any exams you may have to prepare for on your return to school? Or, of course, it's important to take some time and have a holiday in the summer as well. Another consideration is also, will I be sitting the BMAT? Now, if you are thinking of taking the BMAT, and we're going to go into a little bit more information on the BMAT in the second part of this session, if you are considering taking the BMAT, I would recommend taking the UCAT a little bit earlier, purely because you need a little bit of a rest and a little bit of time to get your brain back into aptitude test gear and focus on the BMAT, because although it is also an aptitude test, it is subtly different to the UCAT. So revising for both at the same time, certainly this is what I recommend to my students, and what I found myself tends not to be the best course of action. So ultimately what this is a balancing act. Remember to leave enough time to revise, but don't keep it too late. If you book your test and you decide, I think I maybe need another week of preparation, or you know what, I'm ready to set the test next week, there is also, subject to availability, the opportunity to move your booking. So the test can be quite adaptable in that regard. Now, enough about the admin around the test. Let's start with what's in the UCAT. So the test always starts with verbal reasoning, goes to a decision-making section, a quantitative reasoning section, an abstract reasoning section, followed by situational judgment tests. And this running order is always the same, starting with verbal reasoning. Time varies for each section. And really this exam, if you had unlimited time to take the UCAT exam, you guys are all smart students, you'd probably be able to get 100%. But the catch here is that the examiners put you under immense time pressure. So working around mitigating that time pressure is the key feature of this exam. And importantly as well, time cannot be carried on between the sections. So when we go through the timing, you'll see that the time is standard for each section. So you can't race through verbal reasoning and bank an extra 5 minutes to use on your abstract reasoning, because you can essentially think of this exam as being 5 mini examinations. So verbal reasoning, all about testing your comprehension skills, particularly sort of skim reading, targeted reading, looking for keywords. And you can see where you might need verbal reasoning in a medical scenario could be as a doctor referring patient notes. You need to be able to pick out the key pieces of information to then inform your decision-making and prepare for a consultation with a patient. The next section, decision-making, well, medicine and dentistry even is all about decision-making, looking at the signs and symptoms that a patient presents with, whittling down your options to work out what an appropriate diagnosis might be, and that's all problem solving. Quantitative reasoning, testing some maths-based skills, and we can see how that might be relevant to career medicine, working through drug calculations, for example. Abstract reasoning is one that students are slightly baffled with to begin with. This is all about pattern recognition. So typically, a typical abstract reasoning question will be where they give you a set A and a set B, and within set A and set B, there's different boxes containing different shapes that all conform to a similar or to the same pattern, and there'll be a similar patterns between set A and B. And now pattern recognition, and particularly sort of visual pattern recognition, is important in a medical scenario. When we think of a doctor or looking at X-ray images or any type of imaging, you would need to be able to see patterns and tell between, for instance, a chest X-ray, tell between a normal chest X-ray or a chest X-ray that shows pathology such as a pneumothorax. Situational judgment is slightly different to the other 4 sections in that the other 4 sections have a numerical score, and situational judgment, you're given a banded score. And situational judgment tests come up a lot as part of medical applications, not only for medical school, but it was something in the UK at least, you take an SJT, a situational judgment test, at your final year of medical school, and this helps your application for foundation year 1 jobs. In the situational judgment test, they're testing your softer skills, communication, empathy, ethical reasoning, through giving you a variety of different scenarios and asking you to rate how appropriate or important you think various actions to those scenarios are. Okay, so that's just a verbal overview of the UCAT exam. We're going to now look at some of the different sections and talk about the nuts and bolts of this exam. I would say as a disclaimer right at the beginning, the best way to study for this exam is to get used to the exam format, going through questions. So at the Medic Portal, we have our UCAT course, which gives you a great exposure to the theory. And I've been involved with some personal tuition for students where we go through some really difficult questions, go through some different themes and talk about some of the ways that we can get around those questions and maximize their scores. So the way the scoring works in the UCAT, as we've alluded to, there's 5 sections. Now those first 4 sections, in each of the sections, you can score up to 900 points. So from between 300 and 900 points are on offer in each of the sections. And this is like a UCAT score scaling, just to make sure that everyone fits nicely onto a bell curve. Then in the situational judgment test, this is a standalone score. So what you come out of the exam with is a cumulative score between 1200 to 3600 for the first 4 sections, then a band 1 to 4 in SJT, band 1 being the highest and a band 2 being the lowest. So of course, numerical scores, we can imagine how they might work. The band 1 to band 4 essentially shows the degree of similarity that your answers to the situational judgment questions were to a panel of experts who were given the same questions. So a high level of agreement would lead to a band 1 score, and disagreeing more than you agree would lead to a band 4 score. Now, when we start to look at average scores based on the year, we can see here, so this is from the past 6 application cycles. You can see an average score in the first 4 sections is around 630 out of 900. So if we were to be, for example, scoring 700 above, we suddenly become a really competitive applicant. And you can see highlighted in red there that the verbal reasoning is typically the lowest score. And this tends to be because students applying for medical courses, generally speaking, are doing science subjects at school and a little bit out of practice when it comes to the more English-based skills of comprehension, etc. Now, here are some of the scores by year for the situational judgment test. So we can see the vast majority of students in these past 6 applications cycles, you can see these 30s and 40% are scoring a band 1 to 2 in the SJT there. So that's really where we need to try and be to be as competitive as possible with our application. Okay, so that obviously begs the question next of what is a good score? Now, we can see some of the decile rankings here. When you get your UCAT score, you obviously find out your individual score, and you can look at previous years to see where your score might fit in the decile ranking of previous years, which is where they group the whole cohort who took the UCAT that year into 10% brackets. So obviously, we'd love to be in this 9th decile. This is the top 10%. And you can see in 2020, so last application cycle, this was the average score per section you needed was 712.5 to be in that top 10%, which is of course what we'd all love to aim for. And we saw similar statistics here on the SJT. So you can see most students scoring between a band 1 and a band 2. And obviously we don't need to refer back to previous years because we know what a band 1 or a band 2 means for the SJT. Now, importantly as well, and this is what I alluded to earlier when I talked about how we can use the UCAT to be a strategical application. This is because different medical schools have different policies for how they use the UCAT. Some of them will rank all their applicants by the UCAT score. Some offer a points allocation for different groups. Some universities operate off a minimum cutoffs. For example, St. George's used to have a minimum cutoff score for each section that was required. Some use the UCAT less than others, and they'll only use it in borderline cases. And some, of course, universities don't use it at all because they tend to be the BMAT universities. Ultimately, and particularly when we're preparing for this exam, to consider the higher your score, the better your chances of maximizing your application. So essentially, we can group medical schools based on whether they put a high or a low emphasis on the UCAT exam. And this is really important because you come out of this UCAT exam with your score. You're given your score as a printout as soon as you leave the exam room. So what you can do is you can then look at previous application cycles and go off the data from previous years and start to look at where you think your score gives you the best chance of securing an interview. And that's how the UCAT can be used strategically. And this is one of the big differences between the UCAT and the BMAT, because you sit the BMAT exam after you've already submitted your UCAS application. Now, the timings in the UCAT, so bearing in mind that all of these timings include a 1 minute of reading time. So the standard UCAT test has 20 minutes for the verbal reasoning section, 32 minutes for decision making, 25 minutes for quantitative reasoning, 14 minutes for abstract reasoning, and 27 minutes for the SJT, so giving a 2-hour exam in total. Now, if you have extra time, for instance, at school exams or public examinations, you could also apply to take the UCAT with extra time, and this is called the UCAT SEN test. And here you can see that there's an extra half an hour split over the various sections, coming to a 2.5-hour exam. Remember that all of these timings include a 1 minute of reading time. So actually, for instance, in decision making, you actually have 31 minutes of question time. Okay, so this is a little bit more information on the UCAT SEN. So if, for example, in your school exams, you're entitled to extra time, breaks, or accommodations, you could apply for this test. Equally, if you have specific learning disabilities. Importantly, you must apply 10 working days before the test, giving thorough proof of entitlement, and some other special access options, which may require additional approval, include a 50% extra time, getting 5-minute break between sections, having access to medical items that are not on the UCAT's pre-published comfort aid list, or special access arrangements for your testing center. Right, we are going to go through and give a brief introduction to the different sections, but it's important now to give an introduction to how you can go about preparing for the UCAT exam. At the Medic Portal, our strategy typically splits preparation for the UCAT into 3 stages. The first one is all about understanding and getting an idea of the underlying theory before you start applying that theory and consolidating that theory by loads of practice questions. Now, firstly, it's important to learn the theory. So you could use the UCAT website where there's some practice questions. TMP stands for the Medic Portal, and that's us. On our website, you'll find access to some blog posts talking about the exam. We also have access to our own courses, so we teach online courses. Indeed, we have an online course that you can work through in a self-directed manner. There's also, for those of you more local, there are in-person courses as well. And we also have books on our a theory book as well. There's also books on the web, on the internet, that you might find to help prepare. However, because this is a 2-hour computerized test, it's really important that you complete most of your practice online, simulating the way that the exam will be sat. So I would recommend using our online question bank, which gives a sort of realistic UCAT interface and has the exact same layout as what you'll come and find on test day. So that's all about understanding, learning that underlying theory, knowing what is being examined in this test. Next comes the application, where you apply your knowledge. And this can be using the UCAT online question bank, or indeed, as I've mentioned already, our Medic Portal online question bank. Okay, and you can consolidate using timed online mocks. There are a couple of UCAT official mocks on the website, and then as part of our online question bank through the Medic Portal, we have our own online mocks that are the same difficulty, the same exam as what you would see on test day as well. So really useful revision aid there. Now, the UCAT official guide has this quote here where they say that spend around 21 to 30 hours in preparation for the UCAT. This is the amount of preparation done by the highest scoring respondents to our survey. Personally, and in my experience of working with students applying, preparing to take this exam, as well as my own experience, I think that this is a little bit conservative, and you would probably be needing to spend around 50 hours in preparation. It's a tricky exam, and you need to expose yourself to as many practice questions as possible to properly get your head around how to score well in this exam. Right, so we've talked about an overview of the various sections, and now I'm going to start talking about verbal reasoning in a little bit more detail. So remember, this is the first section when you come in on test day. Now, the UCAT people say that verbal reasoning tests and assesses your ability to think and read carefully about information presented in passages and to determine whether specific conclusions can be drawn from the information presented. Now, an overview of this section is, of course, that's testing your ability to understand and interpret written information quickly. As I mentioned already, a doctor may need to do when they go through a patient's health records or a referral letter. In the exam, you'll be asked to quickly read 11 short passages of text. As a springboard from those passages of text, you'll be asked to identify key pieces of information and draw some correct conclusions from that information. Okay, that sounds a little bit abstract here. I will show you and flash up an example question just so you have an idea of the layout in a couple of slides' time. So the key stats, what are the numbers around verbal reasoning? Well, as I said, there's 11 question sets, and each of those question sets has 4 items, which gives you 44 items in total. And an item is a statement with its associated answer options. So essentially a multiple choice set we could think of as an item. The test, as I mentioned, is 22 minutes in duration, but that includes a 1 minute of reading time. So it's 21 minutes of question time, which gives you almost 2 minutes per set, or 28.6 seconds per item, which is extreme time pressure. Yeah, as I said, the recurring theme with the UCAT is how difficult it is to complete what's required of you in the time allowed. So you can see this is what a screenshot of a typical UCAT verbal reasoning question may look like. So we can see our passage on here on the left here in our information area. We can see an item here. So for example, this one is a statement here, and we're asked whether it's true, false, or can't tell. So we have 28.6 seconds to assess whether this statement is true, false, or can't tell based on this passage. So it's all about doing a targeted read and picking out our key words and sticking brutally to the time limit. Okay, so the passage will be 200 to 400 words. This is the passage here. And there's 2 different types of question format in the UCAT verbal reasoning. There's the older and slightly easier true, false, can't tell format. If I just go back one slide again, this is what this example question was, a true, false, can't tell. Okay, so you're basing all of your answers off the information in the passage, and you're answering, or answering, I should say, whether a statement is true, false, or based on the information in the passage, you cannot tell whether it's true or false. And we're going off a principle of what logically follows, which means that you cannot help but make a conclusion without making any assumptions. So the overarching point that I'm trying to get across here is that it's important to base your answer solely on the terms of the passage, not any prior knowledge that you may have. The other type of UCAT verbal reasoning question is a comprehension style, which is where, again, you'll have 4 items, and they can be questions or statements. And these are the 4 items associated with a specific passage. And what makes a comprehension question slightly harder is that there's more information to assimilate, because rather than your answer options simply being true, false, or can't tell, you'll be given 4 free text answer options. So more information to go through and more keywords to pick out for your targeted read. So this is what a strategic approach might look like for a verbal reasoning question. So once you are in the test, you're flicking through, you're on your computer, and you flash up a verbal reasoning question, you would need to look out for keywords in the question in that item, and then refer back to the passage looking for a targeted read, picking out those keywords. So don't try to read the entire passage, because what that's going to do is that's going to waste precious time, and it's time that you don't need to spend. You simply won't have time to read that entire passage. So we do a targeted read, like a skim read through the passage, looking for keywords that we've identified in the item. And once you've found a keyword in the passage, that will be where you find the information to then use to assess whether an item, for instance, is true, false, or can't tell, or to answer a comprehension style of question. So again, another example here, we've got this passage here, and we've got the statement, The Great Gatsby is fictional with no basis in reality. So we would need to look out for some keywords. So a keyword might be a name, The Great Gatsby, and then we could look at another keyword being fictional. So does it at any point here reference whether the story is non-fiction or fiction, or is it real or not? So we can look at some keywords from that item and then do a targeted read through the passage, sort of skim reading and trying to find out those key words. Okay. Perfect. So that was an introduction to the first section of the exam. So the first of the 5 sections, which is verbal reasoning. Now, the second section that you'll encounter on test day is decision making. Now, the UCAT people say that decision making, this subtest assesses your ability to apply logic to reach a decision or conclusion, assesses how well you evaluate arguments, and how well you analyze statistical information. Again, there's multiple question formats. You are allotted 29 questions in 31 minutes, but that's obviously 30 minutes of question time, so slightly over 1 minute per question. Unlike verbal reasoning, which is where you don't take any knowledge in and you answer all the questions solely based off the terms of the passage, decision-making does require some knowledge. Now, an overview of this section, what are the numbers involved? Well, it's designed to test your decision-making in 3 domains. You'll be asked questions surrounding deductive reasoning. So often they involve logical puzzles, like you'll have a group of dogs and you're told that dog A is taller than dog B, dog D is smaller than dog E, but in between A and B. And you would need to, for instance, work out the size order of the dogs, deductive reasoning, going off, reaching a conclusion based on the premises that you're given in the question. You may be asked to evaluate arguments. So you're given an argument and you may be asked which of these is the strongest argument, evaluating how strong an argument might be. Statistical and figural reasoning often comes up a lot, so that's probability as well as how well you can answer a question based off a graph or a confusing pie chart, for instance, or a Venn diagram style of question. So unlike the other sections of the UCAT, you do need to bring some knowledge in with you for this decision-making section. So you would need to have an understanding of your basic maths, Venn diagrams, as well as probability. You're given 29 items, and again, you have 31 minutes of question time, so it comes to around 64 seconds per question. So although it's still time pressured, it's slightly less time pressured than verbal reasoning, which has half the time per question. So this is an example of what a decision-making question might look like. So you're given a sort of puzzle here, and you'd be asked which symbol does the question mark represent. Correct answer here would be a heart, but this is simply to illustrate one of those problem-solving style of questions, just so you get an example of what it looks like. So moving to the third section of the exam, and this is the quantitative reasoning. Now, the UCAT people say that quantitative reasoning assesses your ability to use numerical skills to solve problems. It assumes familiarity with numbers to the standard of a good pass at GCSE. And GCSE is an exam that UK students take at the age of 16, so in their 3rd last year of high school. However, items are less to do with numerical facility and more to do with problem solving. So it's not really a maths test. What it is integrating maths within problem solving. And most students who I work with tend to find that this section is a little bit more accessible than some of the other ones. Decision making is also quite accessible, whereas verbal reasoning and abstract reasoning do require quite a lot of work. And most of my students ask me to spend most of our time in our lessons going over those sections with them. Okay, again, dealing with numbers here. Right. Okay, so an overview of the quantitative reasoning section. In this exam, or this subtest, I should say, you'll be posed with 9 scenarios, each containing 4 questions, leaving 36 questions in total. You're given 25 minutes, but of course, subtracting that 1 minute reading time leaves you 24 minutes for this section, which arrives at 40 seconds per question, which is quite time pressured. Now, information in these scenarios that you will be asked questions based off, the information might be presented as tables and graphs, charts and pie charts, 2- and 3-dimensional shapes, diagrams, as well as some text-based information. And each question will involve 5 possible answers, including a can't tell option. So this is a bit of a tricky one to include there because they'll give you some information in the scenario, asking a follow-up question. So you need to be really careful in terms of whether or not you select can't tell, okay? Because often there is a way to work out how to answer the question. So some common concepts that come up in quantitative reasoning. I'm sure you guys all study maths at school. These will be familiar to you, but percentages, fractions, and decimals, they love percentage change in this exam. So knowing its difference over the original times 100, really important. Ratios, currency conversions, unit conversions as well. So kilometers to miles, they might tell you. They'll give you the conversion, but these conversions, percentage changes come up a lot. Interest rates, compound interest, speed, distance time graphs, volumes, areas and volumes, mean, median, and mode. So all the reasonably basic maths concepts, but they will come under the guise of quite difficult problem-solving scenarios. Okay, so an example here of a quantitative reasoning style of question. So we can see a scenario here talking about this guy Robert's monthly expenses in several categories for June and July, and we can see the information is presented as a pie chart here, okay, broken into the different facets of his spending, and then we're asked a question which follows on from that example, from that scenario, I should say. Okay, so abstract reasoning. Now, abstract reasoning is tough, and this is all about pattern recognition. And certainly when I was preparing for this exam, as well as the lots of students that I've tutored and on courses, etc., most students come out of a course or a tuition and say, you know what, this is the section I think I need to spend the most time getting my head around. So the UCAT people, again, they say abstract reasoning assesses your ability to identify patterns amongst abstract shapes where irrelevant and distracting material may lead to incorrect conclusions. So an overview of this section. Abstract reasoning is all about testing your spatial reasoning, assessing how good you are at identifying patterns, how you ignore distracting materials. And this is, of course, important as a doctor because you need to focus on the signs and symptoms that are most relevant to the patient without being taken on a tangent. And because you're looking to find a pattern, it's all about developing and modifying a hypothesis. And of course, this is something that is key in medicine because you're constantly working on a differential diagnosis and you're modifying what your diagnosis might be as test results come in, as you receive more information from your patient, etc. And there are 4 types of question in this abstract reasoning. Okay, we have type 1 and type 4 questions where you're given a set A and a set B with a pattern that's linking all boxes within a set A and set B, or you have, you're being asked which shape might complete a sequence, or you may be asked for associations between shapes. There's 55 questions in this section. You have 14 minutes for it. So 13 minutes of question time, taking into account that 1 minute reading time, which leaves under 70 seconds per question set of 5 or 14 seconds per question, which is quite horrific time pressure. But there are definitely some strategies to use to mitigate that time pressure. And if you're interested in finding more about those strategies, do have a look at our online course. And it would be that a live session or the self-directed one, and have a look at our question bank as well. So this is an example of what a type 1 question looks like. So I've alluded to the set A and set B here. So you can see in set A, there's 6 different boxes, and there will be a pattern that links all of these boxes. So the shapes within these boxes, so for example, this is one box, they're not random. They're there because they conform to the pattern. And there'll be a similar reciprocal, as it were, pattern in set B. So we can see here the pattern in set A is that all of the boxes contain a shaded square. So you can see there's a shaded square there. There's one in this top right, another shaded square, another shaded square, and a shaded square. Meanwhile, in set B, hopefully some of you have already identified that in set B, all of the boxes contain an unshaded circle, as you can see there. Now, this is a relatively easy pattern. There are plenty more complicated patterns out there. And you would have essentially 14 seconds for each one of these questions. So you would be given this test shape and be asked to say, does it belong in set A or B, or does it belong in neither? Okay, that's how abstract reasoning works. And that's an example of the type 1 questions, which are typically the questions that most of my students find a little bit more challenging. Right, so we've introduced abstract reasoning. We're now going to move on and have a look at the situational judgment test. Now, the SJT, situational judgment test, is all about measuring your capacity to understand real-world situations and to identify critical factors and appropriate behavior in dealing with them. So it's looking at soft skills. This is rather than raw academic knowledge. This is assessing how well you respond to certain scenarios that may be thrown at you, not only as a medical student, but as a doctor later down the line. Ultimately, you're going to need to make this decision between whether a response or an action is wrong or if it's right, and how wrong or how right an action may be. Situational judgment tests are a recurring theme, particularly in the UK, and they're widely used in medicine. So not only will you need to do an SJT as part of your medical school application for the UK, as part of the UCAT, in your final year of medical school, you make an application for your foundation year 1. So that's your first year working as a doctor. And as part of that job application, you will need to complete an SJT test. And then again, should you decide that you'd like to become a general practitioner, you would need to take another SJT as part of the application for those training roles. So a situational judgment test, what it does is it presents students with a range of different situations they might encounter now, or indeed in their future work environment. And as a follow-on, there'll be a number of possible actions suggested. Okay, so you'll be told who the players are in these scenarios, and then you'll be given a detail of which character is completing these actions or responses. And what you need to do is, depending on the question type, you may need to rate how appropriate or important an action can be. And these are the two different question types in the situational judgment. So an appropriateness question, you may be asked, you'll be asked to rank whether the response is very appropriate, appropriate but not ideal, inappropriate but not awful, or inappropriate or completely inappropriate. In the important style of questions, you'll be asked whether an action is very important, important, of minor importance, or not important at all. And this test is all about measuring your capacity to understand these real-world situations, to appreciate the gravitas of the scenarios, and to identify critical factors and appropriate behavior in how we deal with these scenarios and the responses that stem on from them. So what are the numbers involved with this? So there's 69 items across 22 scenarios, with each scenario getting between 2 and 5 associated questions, 26 minutes of question time, so 27 minus that 1 minute reading time, leaving 23 seconds per question. Now, this sounds like it should be time pressured. However, certainly most of my students don't find the SJT to be as time pressured as some of the other sections. And the 3 types of question that you can be posed with are rating the appropriateness of a response, rating the importance of response, and that's what I've been through already here, or you may be asked to drag and drop to rank the importance of various responses. And your score is given as a band. So where the first 4 sections, as I alluded to before, have that numerical score from 300 to 900 points per section, the SJT, you're given a banded score. Band 1 is the best score, and band 4 is the worst score. So what happens? These massive database of UCAT SJT questions are given to a panel of experts, and they include doctors, teachers, any sort of professional, and they provide their answers. And they essentially serve as the marking scheme. So your answer and your collection of answers from your SJT test is allocated to a band based essentially on the degree of agreement between your responses and those responses of the panel of experts. So those students who score in a band 1 are showing exceptional agreement with the panel of experts. However, those students scoring a band 4 are disagreeing with the experts a little bit more than they're agreeing with the experts. So ultimately, what's being tested here? Now, the situational judgment test is used to test for those non-academic attributes. So they include questions that may relate to honesty and integrity. It's important in a hospital to never lie, because we need to be making sure that we're building rapport and ensuring trust between the doctor and their patient. Pressure and prioritization is really important. As a doctor, and indeed as a medical student, you'll have a huge demand on your time, and you need to be able to rank and prioritize tasks based on what needs to be done here and now and what's more important. Communication skills. how we effectively communicate within a team and how you would communicate as a leader can also come up in the SJT, as well as generally how you would show your commitment to a team or how you could be the best leader in a scenario. Ethical and moral dilemmas may come up as well. Okay, for instance, you may find that you see another colleague stealing medication from a ward. How do you respond? Ultimately, a key thing to remember in the UCAT SJT is that patient safety must be preserved. So you need to take actions that ensure patient safety, meaning that actions which reduce patient safety will generally be inappropriate or certainly not important at all to do. So this is an example of a UCAT SJT question. So you can see here we have our scenario, and we're told this is about Jane, who's a foundation trainee. So she's just left medical school working as a doctor. Okay, we're given some sort of dilemma that's happening in the scenario, and then we're given her response, which in this case is leaving on time to make sure she catches the flight. And we need to rank whether that response is appropriate. It's a very appropriate thing to do, appropriate but not ideal, inappropriate but not awful, or a very inappropriate thing to do. So we've been through the different sections of the UCAT. Again, this is a whistle-stop tour, and I would strongly recommend having a look on our website. And if you're thinking about looking for help for all facets of the application, I would strongly recommend our Bespokes package, which is something that I personally tutor on, and I've had a few students receive some great success in their application through that bespoke package. So once you fully understand the theory and strategies for each question type, it's all about practice. So remember to segment your practice and practice only one area of the UCAT at a time. You may like to cover all the different sections in a day, but in a session, as it were, focusing on one section. Don't worry too much about the time conditions at the beginning. However, it becomes closer to test day. Once we've finalized our accuracy without too much time pressure, it's important to start adding that time pressure on, because that really does start to sort the stronger applicants from the weaker applicants in this test. So once we've got our theory down pat, and we've been learning how to apply, and we've been going through our practice questions, it's then all about consolidating with timed mocks. So this is, of course, once you've practiced applying the theory to the questions, we need to get real and see what a mock might look like. So there, it's important to work through mocks in real-time conditions. Of course, this is all about giving you an exposure to the real deal of the exam day and filling you with confidence that managing different question types, as well as focusing on your time management. So preparing you to be best set up for test day. In your preparation, I would strongly recommend monitoring and tracking your performance across the timed mocks. This will let you know which sections you're finding more difficult, and often it's encouraging just to see a general upward trend. It's important to also use the online question bank to enable you to practice thousands of questions with model answers. And we have a question bank on our website, which includes UCAT and SEN mocks. So you can see this is the screenshot here. So have a look at us, the Medic portal online, and you could get access to our question bank from the website. Okay, so that's what I wanted to discuss concerning the BMAT. Devesh, might it be a good opportunity now to take some questions on the UCAT before I move on to the BMAT?
All right, great. So the first question is how important is it to get a good score in BMAT or UCAT for admissions in the medical universities?
I would say it's paramount. So really everybody applying to medical school is a smart student. So everybody applying to medical school will have terrific grades leaving school and those sorts of things. So the aptitude test is really the common ground. And it's the one sort of area of the application that is really fair between all the students. So I would say that it's important to score well purely because it's a brilliant way of differentiating yourself. And they do form a fundamental part of allocations for interviews, etc. So that would be my answer to that one, Devesh.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for answering that. My next question is, do students who have some learning differences or dyslexia, do they get some additional time or some exam concessions while they are taking the UCAT or the BMAT test?
They do indeed. And it would, what I can do here, let me just scroll back because I had a specific slide that did cover that. Mm-hmm. So let me see if I'll just flick back a little bit. And we can just quickly show for the student asking that question what that would involve. here. So you can see you could apply to take the UCAT using the UCAT SEN. And if you have 25% extra time in public exams, this is what the UCAT SEN involves. Equally, if you have additional access options, you could look at the UCAT SEN 50 or these alternate versions of the UCAT that should hopefully provide for any additional requirements there.
Okay, perfect. My next question is UCAT and the UCAT ANZ the same test or the same kind of test?
So they are the same test in terms of what is assessed. However, importantly to remember, it's difficult to class the UCAT as being the same or different test because, as I mentioned, they have this online database of loads of different UCAT questions, and then you receive a personalized version of that in your exam. So nobody actually sits the exact same test. Everybody always sits the UCAT, and the tests are standardized, so they will be the same level of difficulty. And the UCAT ANZ is no different in that regard to the UCAT, in that somebody's UCAT ANZ test could equally be someone else's UCAT test.
Okay, wonderful. And can students take this test multiple times? Of course, we know they can take it only just once a year, but if they're not happy with their score that year, can they just go ahead and take it the next year as well?
They can indeed, but important to remember that you can only take one test per application cycle, and your test is only valid for your particular application cycle.
Fantastic. Okay.
So if you take the test in 2021, but are applying, are sending an application in 2022, then you would need to do the 2022 UCAT.
Wonderful. So I think we're ready to move ahead with BMAT before we start the final part, that is the MMIs.
Perfect. Okay, brilliant. So we've talked about the UCAT. Essentially, it's difficult to avoid taking the UCAT because the vast majority of medical schools do require it. However, there are medical schools that require the BMAT test, and that's what we're going to go into and start talking about now. So the BMAT stands for the Biomedical Aptitude Test, and it's a 2-hour pen and paper test. Unlike the UCAT, which doesn't really involve much knowledge, the BMAT looks to combine knowledge and aptitude into its exam. So this is all about focusing on using logic and applying existing knowledge. Like the UCAT, the BMAT is an aptitude test designed to find the best potential doctors, and it's divided into 3 sections. So you've got section 1, critical thinking and problem solving, section 2, which is scientific knowledge and application, and section 3 is a writing task, a short essay. Now, important admin here, which universities require the BMAT? So we can see that for dentistry, it's Leeds, for biomedical sciences, it's Oxford, and the BMAT for medicine is required by Oxford, Leeds, Cambridge, Lancaster, Brighton, UCL, and Imperial. There are some other universities around the world that do take the BMAT as well, but we're looking at the UK here. Now, the asterisk you can see on the table relates to Keele and Manchester. So for local students, UK-based students, Keele and Manchester request the UCAT test. However, international applicants to these 2 universities would be required to take the BMAT. So that's definitely something to be aware of, particularly as I imagine many of you guys coming from India will be international students, which is great. So further admin concerning the BMAT, when and where is it taken? Now, unlike the UCAT, which we remember you have to book individually and take it in a sort of public test center, as it were, the BMAT tends to be taken at your school. Sometimes it can be at a local test center. Like the UCAT, the result is only valid for 1 year, and you can only sit it once per application cycle. Now, for the past couple of years, there's been 2 sittings of the BMAT, so you can choose which one you do. They have recently introduced a September sitting, and the September sitting means that you can receive your result before you launch a UCAS application, which is helpful. However, most students still tend to take their their BMAT, in November, purely to give them a little bit more time after taking the UCAT. If you're taking the November BMAT, then you have already submitted your UCAS application. However, I personally chose to take my BMAT, in November, because that allowed sufficient time after the UCAT to sort of rest, recharge, finish my personal statement, submit my application, and gear up for the BMAT. In 2021, they've cancelled the early sitting as a result of some COVID mitigations, and the test this year is being taken on November 3rd. Typically, registration takes place in September, so it's important because normally it's registration that happens through your school. Okay, so it's important that your school is aware that you would like to take the BMAT. Right, BMAT scoring. So for sections 1 and 2, so section 1 I've mentioned already is that critical thinking and problem solving section. And section 2 is our scientific knowledge and application. These are all multiple choice questions where each question, there's 60 questions or just under 60 questions in section 1 and around just under 30 questions in section 2. Every question of those is worth 1 mark. And then your total mark, your raw score becomes scaled to this 9-point BMAT scale. There's no negative marking in either the BMAT or the UCAT. So you're crazy to leave a question blank in any of these tests, even if it's just a guess. Put one down because you've got to be in it to win it. And who knows, your lucky guess may be true. The BMAT scale ranges from 1 to 9. Now, a typical successful candidate in terms of securing an interview scores 5. The best candidates are scoring 6 and above, and there are a few exceptional candidates who score above a 7. So we really want to be aiming for a 6.5 to be super competitive with our BMAT score. For section 3, it's subtly different to the other two. So remember, section 3 is the essay section. And for the essay, you get 2 scores. You get one facet of the score, which is an alphabetical score, where you're graded in A to E for your quality of English, or you may have a numerical score, you will have a numerical score accompanying that, which is graded from 1 to 5 for the quality of your content. So when you come out of the exam, you'll get a score from 1 to 9 for section 1, a score from 1 to 9 for section 2, and a score from section 3, which will include, for example, a 4A score. So a numerical score for the quality of your content, and an alphabetical score for the quality of your English. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the different sections. Section 1, first of all. Section 1, you're given 60 minutes and 32 MCQ, multiple choice questions, leaving just under 2 minutes per question. And the types of questions that will come up in section 1 include mathematical, verbal, and spatial reasoning questions. And this is a test of your aptitude and skills. So they're looking for how you adapt to generic problem-solving skills, how you understand arguments, how you use your data analysis and inference skills. And the types of question that they assess these aptitude and skills under are either problem-solving or critical thinking style questions. So problem-solving questions, obviously you need to have your thinking cap on for these, and these comprise 16, so half of the questions in section 1. And this is all about assessing your ability to use logic and basic mathematical principles to solve problems. You need to think on the spot to figure out principles, and some typical question types can include speed, distance and time questions, questions manipulating pin numbers or alphabet style questions, partial table questions, logical reasoning, sequences and rules, as well as some spatial reasoning can come up here as well. So this is an example of a spatial reasoning question. So you can see based on the structure there, you're being asked, assuming all 3-dimensional boxes below are the same size, how many boxes make up the structure below? Okay, and of course, looking at some hidden shapes that we may see kind of behind these ones there, we can conclude that that would be 8. So that was a problem-solving example. The other half of section 1 is critical thinking, and most students tend to find this one a little bit more difficult. So it would require a little bit more theory drilling to get used to this style of question. Okay, so critical thinking will comprise half of section 1, and this is all about testing your understanding of arguments. So from the BMAT section 1 question guide, which can be found on the BMAT website, they say that the skill of critical thinking is essential for many areas of academic study and often involves considering an argument put forward to promote or defend a particular point of view. Whatever the subject of study, it is necessary to answer the arguments presented by others and to be able to assess whether their arguments establish their claims. So essentially, you're being asked to assess argument strength, whether there's flaws in the argument. So they're questions that need a solid foundation in what the structure of an argument involves and what the structure of an argument might look like. So you can see here, you get this reasonably short passage that you have enough time to read thoroughly, and then you're being asked, in the case of this question, which of the following can be drawn as a conclusion from the passage? So drawing a conclusion from this argument here is the question you're being asked. Okay. So some top tips when it comes to preparing for section 1. So for problem solving, it's important to read the question carefully and use the data presented to you carefully. Pay attention to units on a table, for instance. Because obviously time is of the essence and there's no calculator for this exam, finding shortcuts is obviously quite important because you need to make sure that you're using your time as effectively as possible. You should also establish and use simple calculations wherever possible. Again, the mitigating factor being that you do not have a calculator. When it comes to critical thinking, on the other hand, it's important to understand the different elements of an argument. Remember that premises can be added, removed to strengthen or weaken an argument. So you'll often be asked one of your answer options, maybe an additional premise, a piece of information that may strengthen or weaken an argument. And you need to think of how that has an impact on the text of the argument that you've read prior. It's important to also read the question, the passage, and then answer the questions. This is unlike some of the strategies that we recommend in the UCAT. Of course, read the question carefully. Critical thinking does require careful thought and careful decision-making when choosing between different answer options. Okay, let's move on now and discuss section 2. So section 2 is the scientific knowledge and application. Hurrah, because science is something that most students tend to have a good grasp of, and it tends to be something that they are able to work well with. So section 2 does require knowledge, and specifically the knowledge that you'll need is there's 27 questions in this section. So what the 27 is standing for there, and it's going to be 27 key stage 4, in other words, GCSE, so age 16 approximate level questions in maths, so 6 of those 27 questions. Physics, 7 of the 27, chemistry, 7 of the 27 questions, and biology, another 7 of the 27 questions, leaving a total of 30 minutes for this section. So you get a little over a minute, 66 seconds per each of these questions. An example question here from the physics type might be, I have some tea I would like to keep hot, and you're being asked which container would be best to put the tea in. So you're working off your physics principles of energy and energy conduction, convection, etc. So some top tips when it comes to preparing for section 2 of this exam. It's important to familiarize yourself with common topics and concepts for each science at a GCSE of age 16 level. Learn the key formulae and their associated units. Units is a classic way that the UCAT people like to make this test challenging and like to trip some people up to sort the top applicants from the weaker applicants. There's an online science guide which you can use in tandem with the BMAT syllabus to map your revision. These are both available on the BMAT website. It's also important to pay close attention to your units and orders of magnitude. Remember, of course, that you should never leave a question unanswered. This goes for both aptitude tests, the BMAT, as well as its sister test in the UCAT. There's no negative marking. So whenever you think you're not 100% sure about a question, I would still strongly recommend putting a guess and moving on, because you've got to be in it to win it. Right, so we've talked through section 1 and we've talked through section 2. Let's go through section 3, which is all about the essay style. Okay. So section 3 is your essay. And in this section, you'll get a choice of 3 essay questions. You have to answer one of these and you get 30 minutes to do so. A really key feature of the BMAT is that your essay has to fit into one sheet of A4 paper. And importantly, because they're testing how well you plan your time, you're only given one of these answer sheets. Okay, so it's handwritten on there. If you were, say, answering question 2 out of 3 to begin with, remember you only answered one of the questions, and you got to here answering question 2, but then you decided actually you think you'd perform better answering question 3, you would only have the remaining space to write your answer for question 3. So you do need to make sure that you think clearly about how you're structuring your arguments, that you write concisely, cogently, clearly, and that you answer the question directly, because you don't have a lot of time. Planning as a result is really important. And even though you're writing an essay in 30 minutes, there is still sufficient time to plan for this section 3 section. So the BMAT people say that the essay writing task tests your ability to select, develop, and organize ideas and communicate them in writing using a concise and effective manner. So the approach for section 3 is to remember that there's normally going to be 3 subparts of one of those questions, and they almost always ask for the same things. So as a result, we can go off what the standard question type is, and we can learn some techniques for how to approach the question type. So the way the essay works is that you'll be given a statement and then you'll be asked to firstly explain what the statement means. And this is only short, 1 to 2 sentences. You'll then be asked to argue objectively. So normally the examiner will say, present arguments against the statement. And this is normally 5 to 8 sentences. And then finally, you'll be asked to argue subjectively. So they'll ask you where you stand. So you would need to mitigate the objective argument, so provide the other side of the argument to balance it out. You would then need to reach a balanced conclusion before supplying your subjective opinion. Okay, so what it boils down to is what may initially look like totally different questions in terms of the 3 questions that you're offered. When you boil it down to what specifically you're being asked to do based on those question types, the essay can become quite formulaic, because the first part is all about that explain it, then you'll be asked to argue objectively, and then you argue subjectively. So some example statements that have come up in previous years, I can show you on screen now. So the first one here, Rosalind Franklin said that science gives only a partial explanation of life. You may then be asked to explain what Rosalind Franklin meant in this statement. You could then be asked to argue to the contrary, that science gives a complete explanation of life. And then you may be asked, to what extent do you agree with the statement? And you can see that that breaks down into that explain it, objective argument, followed by subjective argument. Another example statement here, in the age of modern healthcare, every time a patient dies after a routine operation or procedure, it's a case of medical error. Again, 3-pronged, that question most likely. Another statement example, when you want to know how things really work, study them when they're coming apart. So that might link nicely into giving it an example about the anatomy lab. And then a final example here, liberty consists in doing what one desires. Okay, so you can see there's quite wide reaching in terms of the statements that you could be given. Some of them are going to be a little bit more philosophical, others more sciencey. However, normally the follow-up questions will be similar. That explain it, objective, subjective argument. A quick guide for how you could budget your answer length. So remember, you only get that one side of paper, so it's not a lot of space. The total length of the essay will tend to be between 280 to 400 words, and you could break that down into even 11 to 18 sentences. The first part, the explain it part, typically takes between 20 to 40 words or 1 to 2 sentences, before your objective argument is normally this 130 to 180 words, 5 to 8 sentences, and then a subjective argument of 180 words or 5 to 8 sentences, following up with that nice balanced conclusion, giving your subjective opinion. So as far as preparing for the BMAT is concerned, we typically say at the Medic portal, and from my experience in working with students as well, this tends to hold true, is that the exam requires 8 weeks of preparation. So if we're working back from when you would take the UCAT, you do need to launch into that consideration as well. Don't overlook the sciences. So make sure that you have the knowledge. Go back and revisit some high school science and maths that you learned a couple of years ago, but have grown a bit rusty on. There's loads of free resources as well. So all past papers are available on the BMAT website. Obviously, the more recent past papers will be more indicative of what you'll see on your test day. There's also an online BMAT science guide, which can use a little bit of a textbook, coupled as well with the BMAT syllabus. So how I went about my revision for the BMAT, for the science component at least, is I had the science guide and the syllabus, and I went through and I printed out the syllabus, highlighting the points that I wasn't so sure on, and then I just looked up those syllabus points in the science guide, and that formed my knowledge revision before I went through doing practice questions. In addition to those free resources, you can get additional help from courses, books, and question banks. Again, at the Medic portal, we offer BMAT courses, and we have a BMAT question bank as well. If you were interested in private tuition, we do also offer that as well. And we have our bespoke package, which is where you would be allocated 1 or 2 tutors to offer a tailored help through your application process. And we would help you with your UCAT, BMAT, personal statement, interview, deciding medical schools, etc. So I would recommend that bespoke package in particular. So a little bit more about the resources that we offer for the UCAT and the BMAT. As I said, we've got our online courses, and these can be self-directed. and we talk about the UCAT and the BMAT in those courses, fully interactive. We have an online UCAT course and an online BMAT course. We have our question banks, both for the UCAT and the BMAT, thousands of questions, and they're giving you, particularly for the UCAT, which is also an online test, if the formatting of the question bank is exactly the same as what you'll see on test day. Okay, so that kind of concludes our summary and our whistle-stop tour through the UCAT and the BMAT. And I know that we're back on schedule. As I said, I wanted to spend a little bit longer covering the UCAT and BMAT because they're such important parts of the UK application. So Devesh, I think we're pretty prepared to take a couple of questions now, and then we should be ready to start at 2 for the interview.
Alicia, actually, we are running slightly later than scheduled. The next session. So actually, before going ahead, maybe I'll just take a couple of questions and then pass it back to you.
No worries. I'm more than happy to sort of crack on, and we can do the interview slightly quicker. I imagine about 20 minutes for the interview, so we should be thereabouts.
Perfect, perfect. Great. So I think we're ready to start discussing about the interviews. I'll just stop this recording. Thank you for sharing information about BMAT. And okay, let's start the next session recording.
No problem. Okay, so thank you for continuing to tune in. Yes. Talking through mastering the medical school interview now. So the aims and objectives, what we're going to be talking about in this little section is about going through your interview technique and understanding the structure and different styles of interview, and also how we can gain confidence with the MMI style of interview prep. And we're going to talk about some different styles of question and develop that structured approach to your interview preparation, as well as learning to handle the more difficult, some of the discriminator style of questions. Now, of course, COVID has thrown a few spanners in the works of how interviews tend to work, and there's now some online interviews. So medical schools will still be able to run MMI interview circuits online, albeit virtual. So COVID hasn't removed the interview from being a crucial part of the application. Remember, of course, that the content remains the same, and you still need to prepare for the same topic as per the in-person interviews. Now, the format and experience is different to your in-person interviews, so it is essential that you prepare specifically how to approach online interviews. So when we look at our online interviews, it's important to take into account a few different things. Think about your location and your setup. Choose your quiet, clean, well-lit room. Think about your body language and your speech. Maintain eye contact to the camera, looking at the webcam rather than your screen. And you may need to speak slightly slower than you would in person because obviously there's going to be difficulties hearing. Dress code. To be less alarming on the interview day, try to avoid stripes or bright colors. So using plain, neutral, and dark colors are important as well. Make sure you test all your technical equipment in advance. You don't want to have a Wi-Fi cutout or your laptop run out of battery during an interview, and try to prevent interruptions. So close tabs, lock doors, make sure that you have a do not disturb sign on your door so that your family don't come rushing in, for instance. Okay, so let's go through some interview technique. Firstly, why do medical schools interview? Well, it's a communication exercise. Medicine is a profession that relies heavily on communication, and they're all about testing your commitment and interest. Okay, the interviewer is also going to be interested to see whether you have a realistic insight into what a career in medicine involves, and it's all about evaluating your suitability for a career in medicine. They may also like to validate your personal statement. So way back at the beginning of today's session, I did mention that the universities will use your personal statement as a springboard going into interview. So there's a few different styles of interview. You have panel interviews, multiple mini interviews, they're MMIs, and also Oxbridge interviews, which are subtly different. So we're going to be talking through those different styles today. So again, we've seen this slide already, talking through the different types of interviews that are offered across the UK, so different medical schools. So a panel interview, again, normally 15 to 30 minutes long, with 2 to 5 panel members asking you questions, and they could be admissions tutors, doctors, university staff, medical students, lay members of the public, etc. The MMI, meanwhile, again, we've seen the slide already today, typically 5 to 10 stations, 3 to 10 minutes per station, with focused shorter interviews, combining traditional questions and your MMI specific skills. Some examples of multiple mini interviews specific skills are communication skills, professional judgment, empathy, problem solving, data interpretation and numeracy, comprehension, as well as video stations. And video stations is what I alluded to before, where they may show you what a consultation between a doctor and a patient might look like, and you may need to critique what the doctor did well, so assessing your professional judgment, as well as your communication skills within that sort of video station scenario. MMI circuits are quite similar to going speed dating, because you're going through moving between these stations, building rapport and meeting interviewers as you go around. And if your interview is online, which is more than likely, then these will be a series of online breakout rooms. So it's still following a similar scenario rather than you physically walking around. You can see you may go from a station on problem solving to a station asking about your work experience, a station that's assessing your motivation for medicine. Why medicine? You may have a scenario all about breaking bad news before you go to a professional judgment station. You could start at station 5, move to station 1. Essentially, you're working in that sort of logical sequence. So a typical MMI station will first of all get you to read instructions, and that will take about 1 to 2 minutes standing outside the room. And this is where you start to think about what skills they're looking for, and you can start assessing how you can display these skills. So you've got a minute kind of mental preparation time. You'll then go into the station and be asked to complete the task, and this typically takes between 3 to 10 minutes. And there will be in the task with you, there'll be an examiner with a feedback form. So they'll be writing some notes and starting to grade you as they would in a panel interview as well. Now, the people in the station may also include actors, particularly in a situation where you may be asked to showcase communication skills. That could be with an actor. You may also be asked to use props and sort of data packages, etc. And then at the end, there'll be a bell that rings and you move to the next station or move to the next breakout room. So some top MMI tips. So that golden minute of preparation that you get at the beginning, it's important to use that as wisely as possible. So think about what skills could be tested in that scenario, and then plan how you will demonstrate those required skills. So hopefully by the time you come to your interview, you will have done a bit of preparation and you'll have a rough idea of the different types of stations that can come up, and you can start to draw associations versus what you're about to go into. Look out for any props and see how you can use them. If there's a communication station and you get a pen, use the pen, draw a diagram. As soon as you finish one station, it's important to just forget about it. Focus on the next one. It's important not to bring any concerns that you may have from one of your answer in one station onto the next one. Make sure you're versatile and energetic. You're constantly making a new first impression. And that's the other great thing about MMI. If one of them goes poorly, it doesn't throw the whole interview. A panel interview, you get one shot. Multiple mini interviews, you get lots of different shots. Oxbridge interviews. So the reason that I've separated this out a little bit is because Oxbridge, although they're similar to panel interviews, those interviewing you are more scientific minded and clinical minded. They're going to be asking you more lateral thinking questions to try and mimic a tutorial. So they're looking to see how you see both sides of an argument, think on your feet, explain your views to others, and present information and cope with pressure. So we're going to first talk about a little bit about what an interview may assess in terms of your motivation for medicine. So there's a difference between them asking opened and closed questions. So open questions, you should identify require longer answers with multiple considerations. And this is where they facilitate a large number of possible answers from you. You can explore complex issues and subjectivity. So for instance, why medicine is quite an open question. Okay, and there's lots of different things that you can bring into that answer. Equally, in an open question, the interviewee will begin to control the conversation, and that's you. A closed question is normally where they're expecting a one-word or sentence answer. These are going to be quick, easy to analyze answers. They can be focused, okay, and then with the interviewer controlling the conversation. So it's important to take into account what type of question you're being asked. Now, in your motivation for medicine, you may be asked, tell me something about yourself. Why do you want to be a doctor? Do you think you'll make a good doctor? What do you look forward to least about being a doctor? Have you read anything medically related? These are all motivation type questions. And this is where you can start to illustrate and talk about your additional reading. So I would suggest in preparation for the interview, try to read at least one medically related publication regularly. That could be the Student BMJ, the British Medical Journal, the New Scientist, newspapers, or the BBC website. As I said, if you're applying to med school in the UK, you need to understand what's happening in terms of healthcare news in the UK. So understanding what the key issues in the NHS are, understanding what are the key themes around the UK, super important. The BBC is a great resource to do that. It might be good as well to prepare an article that you've read recently that's interesting and relevant. So they may ask, tell me about an article you've read recently. Tell me about something you've read recently. That may even be a book. For example, Adam Kay's This Is Going to Hurt is a fantastic book. Other ones by Atul Gawande is fantastic as well. And Paul Kalanithi's When Breath Becomes Air. There's Henry Marsh's Do No Harm, all really common books that students read in advance of an interview. They give a great insight into the career. So some additional motivation questions I've shown up on screen here. How have you shown your commitment to medicine? How will you deal with death? What challenges do you think you will face as a future doctor? As well as even talking through your personal statement, where you will have already started to identify some of your motivations to become a doctor. So just to summarize that little subsection, to prepare for the motivation style questions, it's important to reread your personal statement before the interview, understand your own personal reasons for wanting to study medicine. It's an individual choice for an individual career. Dedicate some regular time to exploring medicine as a career, but also think about the challenges to medicine. It's not always easy. You're working long shifts. You have to deal with death. People are sick around you. It's a long time to study. So it's not all roses in a career in medicine, but it is still a great career path. You may also like to have talked to doctors and medical students to help gain further insight. So another key bit that they may ask a lot about in the interviews is work experience. And this is how you can gain an insight into medicine. Speaking to medical students and doctors, attending lectures and events, reading around medicine, watching some documentaries, any volunteering or charity work, any work experience you've been on as well. So the purpose of work experience is to confirm your desire to become a doctor. It's all about gaining that realistic insight into the medical profession, evaluating your suitability, seeing based on what the doctors do, is this something that I'd be comfortable doing as well? And also how you develop certain skills. So you then need to reflect on this as well, and reflecting on how this made you feel and what you've learned before you think about what skills and attributes you saw. And then also consider, has this experience, your work experience, shadowing a doctor, being volunteering, etc., has it strengthened your desire to study medicine? And that's all about the reflection. And this all boils down to reflect, reflect, reflect. Think also, what are the challenges you saw about a career in medicine? Has this put you off? So what you need to show to your interviewer is that you have a balanced view of what the career involved, and you have a practical assessment of what it would mean to work as a doctor. It's all about that reflection. So for the work experience questions, make sure that you keep a log when you are doing your work experience. So write down any interesting cases that stood out, and you maybe like to do some extra reading around them. So for instance, I was actually very fortunate in my work experience to actually see the beginnings of a gender reassignment procedure. So I did some reading around the medical procedures of that, which is an interesting springboard in interview. You may like as well to list the challenges you saw and how you will overcome them. Think about times you saw key attributes and skills in action. How can you reflect on what the great teamwork skills, what the great communication skills, how well doctors empathize with their patients? Can you reflect on those and then think how you could also show the same skills? Consider how your other experiences can demonstrate insight. It doesn't just have to be clinical work experience. It could be volunteering, for instance. And then also think about this multidisciplinary team in action. There's loads of people working in a hospital who will turn the cogs to make sure that the place functions as best possible for its patients. Now, another key area of medical interview questions is about teamwork and leadership. So some typical questions they could ask here is, what do you understand by the term multidisciplinary teams? You could be asked to talk more about the role of some allied healthcare professionals. You could be asked what can make a team fail. You could be asked to talk about a time when you experienced conflict in a team. You could be asked to give an example of when you have been a leader, for instance. And teamwork and leadership, well, leadership in particular here, you can think about what some of the key qualities are of a leader. And then you may like to reflect on these questions and talk about how you can already show some of these aspects of what a great leader does. Because ultimately, a doctor is a leader. They're a leader to the other doctors around them. They're a leader for their patients, and they're a leader to the other allied healthcare professionals working in a hospital as well. So remember, whenever you're relating back to your personal experiences at the Medic Portal, and I recommend to my students as well to follow this STAR answer format. So give the interviewer the situation, what was going on, what was the task you had to do, what was your action, what was your result, and then importantly, how did you reflect on that scenario so you could be a better team worker, a better leader next time? And think about some buzzwords. So a leader should be someone that's inspiring, A leader should be someone who listens and communicates clearly. They should be able to delegate appropriately. They should be approachable. They should be creative and adaptable, and they should thrive under pressure. So think clearly to yourself, how can I start to show these key characteristics of a leader in response to these questions from the examiners? So again, some top tips: prepare a strong example of a time where you've led a team. Have a unique example of where you've been involved in teamwork. It's got to be something personal. You could be part of a drama group, in an orchestra, playing in a team sport. And you may like to link team working to that multidisciplinary team, the MDT you've seen on your work experience. And you could say, you know what, I saw that orthopedics team, how they all sat around and had a look at that x-ray together and then decided a course of action for the patient. And you know what, although it's not a medical scenario, this is something I've really done a little bit with a project that I was a part of. I was working as part of a team, for instance. Think about when teams may fail and why. And then the examiner may ask, if you were the leader of a team, how would you prevent a team failing, for instance? It's also important to prepare an example of when you've been involved in conflict. So what are your conflict resolution skills like? That could come up in an interview. So reaching the end here, they may also ask about your moral and professional reasoning. So in interviews, this can feature in ethical scenarios, in other words, the classic "what would you do" question, or some communication skills, empathy, and this is going to be assessed through some direct questions. So that could be in the panel or the MMI. You may have situational judgment style ranking. They may give you, they may talk about a scenario. You may have to be asked to rank certain responses to the scenario. There could be a role play that you need to be part of with an actor, with an examiner observing your interactions. There could be some group interviews at different universities, as well as a video station. We've talked about what the video station may involve already. So when we approach our ethical questions, it's important to take a second to think about the dilemma before we answer it. Consider the arguments for, the arguments against, and then come to our balanced conclusion. It's also important to never rush in and give an answer without your supporting evidence. Remember that whatever you say, you need to be able to back up, and you need to have thought critically about the scenario. When it comes to an ethical question, there's no correct answer. So what that means is the examiner can ask constant follow-up questions and essentially play a little bit of devil's advocate with you. Remember, there's no incorrect approach, so just make sure that your logic is well-reasoned and based on ethical principles. So some key ethical themes that often come up at interview include organ donation, resource allocation, alcohol and illicit drug use, as well as some self-inflicted conditions. So for instance, lung cancer stemming as a result of chronic smoking. Whenever you're dealing with an ethical scenario at interview, consider your arguments for, against, and how we can come to a balanced conclusion. So here are some sample ethics questions. So what do you know about the opt-out system in Wales for organ donation? What are your opinions? The UK has recently changed to England has recently changed to an opt-out system as well. So that would be part of being abreast of current affairs. Talking about blood transfusions, ethical issues surrounding this. Is it ever appropriate to break confidentiality? Social media scenarios come up a lot. So how do we protect our patients' privacy and confidentiality in social media? Really important to consider and think about on the spot as well. Now, overarching all of these interview themes comes professionalism. So it's important that you read and familiarize yourself with the GMC's good medical practice and the duties of a doctor. Always act within your remit. Remember that patient safety comes first, and of course, seek help where required. Now, the General Medical Council releases this publication, Good Medical Practice. I'd strongly recommend reading it. Not only does it help prepare for the SJT of the UCAT, but you can also use the sentiments from there as a springboard for consideration in your interview. So that document is written by the General Medical Council, and what they are, they're kind of the regulating body for doctors in the UK, setting those standards, ensuring those standards are met, overseeing medical education, and taking action when there's a risk to their patients. So some top tips for the moral and professional reasoning. We're about 5 minutes away from finishing. Use those 4 pillars of beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and in any ethical question, always consider both sides of the argument. Revise common topics such as organ donation and euthanasia. Remember to understand what constitutes professionalism and how to display, and know about the NHS Constitution. So that can be found online. So use the principles of the NHS and its core values to link back and talk more about these interview scenarios. Okay. A final point they could mention is problem solving as well. So you may have MMI stations that integrate problem solving as part of the stations. So inside the station, you may be given a list of people with different professions and think, which 3 would you choose to have with you if you were marooned on a desert island? A problem solving station, there's no correct answer, but what you'll be asked is you'll be asked to reason and explain your choices. So when you approach these problem solving questions, it's important to remain calm, talk through your answer reasonably, start with the facts, then build up to reach a conclusion for the examiner so they can follow your train of thought. Don't worry too much about getting the answer right or wrong. What they're looking is how you think and what your problem solving skills are like, how you approach these questions. So this is all about your inquisitive abilities. So to wrap up, we'll just talk a little bit about Oxbridge style questions on their own here. So they may ask you a little bit more lateral thinking problem solving questions. How much does Mount Everest weigh? Why do tribes who hunt with poison tipped darts not die when they eat meat? Again, you can see some of these questions flashing up on screen here, a little bit more lateral thinking, stuff that you wouldn't have encountered before, and they're throwing you in unfamiliar scenarios and seeing how you respond. That's technically what the Oxbridge interviews will try and do. So when you're approaching a problem-solving question, remain calm and composed. They're purposely throwing these unfamiliar scenarios at you. They also present an opportunity for you to demonstrate working under pressure. It's important to be resilient, but not dismissive. So try to work with the examiner and show your ability to work in a tutorial environment if this is pertaining to Oxbridge. And always think we need to be logical, objective. How would a scientist approach these scenarios? And of course, the final question they may ask you, is there anything you wish to ask the medical school? Okay, so you may have some questions for the medical school at the end of your interview, and that is a great opportunity to show that you've looked at their website and you've read a bit about what it might mean to study at a particular institution, okay, and they would be interested in you already having taken the initiative to look and see what they have to offer. Okay, and are there any questions for me? That is the end of my sessions today. Thank you so much for tuning in. More than happy to take a couple of questions. I apologize for running slightly over, but I think there's a lot of important stuff to cover. So I hope that everyone found it useful today.
First of all, thank you so much, ICO. It was a pleasure listening to you. Thank you for the presentation and for sharing so much information with us. I'm sure all the students and the parents and the educators who joined us today gained tremendously from this session. In the interest of time, I think we would be going forward with the next session, but I would request you to stay back and use the Q&A feature and type in some of these answers so that the students who have some questions, they could just get responses from you directly. And with that, I would also request you to just enter the email ID that you would want us to write emails to. If you would want, where should the students send their additional questions? If you could also,
I think the best plan there, Devesh, would be for the students to contact the Medic portal directly with any questions that stem from these initially. If they would like to arrange any tutoring with us, attend any courses, contact the Medic portal directly. There's contact links on our website as well. I think that would be the best course of action. I'm happy to hang around and type some messages into the chat for the next 10 minutes or so, but I hope that everyone enjoys the rest of today.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Thank you, Alistair. It was a pleasure having you on this session today.
Cheers.
Okay, with that, we are ready for the next session. And for that, I would invite Patricia and Helen from my team to take over and just proceed with this session. Hi, Patricia. It's a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you.
Helen will take it forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Patricia, so we'll start the session.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can go ahead and share my screen and get started.
Yes, so we'll start with giving a formal introduction and then I'll pass over the section to you.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes. Hello, good evening to yet another interesting session of the Study Medicine Abroad series conducted by the Next Genius webinars in collaboration with the Medic portal. I'm Helen Thomas, communications expert at the Next Genius Foundation. And today we have Patricia Hun with us from Juniata College to talk about pre-med and healthcare majors in the US. Let me start off by giving a brief introduction of Patricia. Patricia Hun became the director of the Health Professions Program at Juniata College in June 2020. Having previously worked as a pre-health advisor at the Pennsylvania State University for the previous 6 years, she began her career in academic advising in the College of Agricultural Sciences at Penn State in 2007 and has been working in areas of education, engineering, and forensic science. She holds a baccalaureate degree in meteorology and a master's degree in entomology with a concentration in forensic science, both from Penn State. She is active in both the National Academic Advising Association and the National Association of Advisors in the Health Profession. Welcome to Next Genius webinars, ma'am.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So
I'm going to go.
Sorry to interrupt, but before we begin the session, I have two reminders for all the participants out here. So the first reminder is that all the sessions will be recorded and it will be uploaded on YouTube as a part of the Study Medicine Abroad playlist. There is also a live YouTube streaming of all the sessions that we are doing on all the sessions that we are conducting on Study Medicine Abroad. The second thing is there will be a live Q&A session towards the end, and you can post all the doubts and queries related to this session that we are having with Patricia, ma'am. So go ahead and ask your doubts and queries during the session, or you can post your doubts and queries towards the end. And with that, let's begin the session, ma'am. It's over to you. You can share your presentation and
Okay, great.
You can take it ahead.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen. Yeah, please.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening and welcome to our session on medical education in the United States. My name is Patricia Hunt and I am the director of the Health Professions Program here at Juniata College. International applicants to U.S. medical schools have to be considerate of some of the aspects of the application process. In this presentation, I will discuss some of the challenges faced by international applicants, alternative pathways in healthcare and science, and how to best prepare and use some best practices when you're preparing an application for medical school and beyond. First, and probably the biggest challenge to international applicants to U.S. medical schools comes in the area of finances. Many medical schools require international students to have money in what's considered an escrow account to cover both tuition and possibly cost of living expenses prior to you starting medical school. And the reason for this is there is a lack of funding available for international students in the forms of grants and federal and government-sponsored loans. Therefore, students need to recognize the need for finances as they begin to prepare for the process of applying to medical school. The amounts range from school to school. Some schools only require 1 full year of tuition and cost of living expenses upfront. However, there are some schools that will require all 4 years of tuition and fees upfront. Options then, so because there's very limited federal funding available to non-US citizens, some of the options available to international students include private bank loans, but for those, typically international students are going to need a cosigner. So some family member to co-sign the loan for them. Some students are able to get loans from their home country and their home government. Usually those that do tend to have a requirement associated with them that the student, if your government is going to pay for your medical school or help subsidize your medical school tuition, they will often require you to come back to the home country and practice for a certain amount of time. There are scholarships available for international students. They are highly limited. They do tend to be merit-based, and typically given after the first year of medical school. However, those will most likely not cover all of your expenses. Challenge number 2 is related to getting accepted into medical school in the first place. There are 2 funding structures for medical school in the United States. There's public schools and there's private schools. Public medical schools receive money from their state governments to cover some of their costs. In return, these schools' primary mission is typically to serve the population of their state. And so that usually comes with strings attached on the medical school, where a certain percentage of their incoming classes have to be state residents. For example, the Michigan State University School of Osteopathic Medicine is actually, in order to receive their state funding, must maintain 90% of their class as Michigan residents in order to maintain their state funding. So they have a class of about 200 students every year entering medical school. So because of that 90% requirement of Michigan residents, there are only 20 spaces for students who live outside of the state of Michigan. The other funding structure is private. Private medical schools do not depend on state funding, and therefore they can be more liberal in where they accept students from. Typically, private schools are much more international friendly. However, they do tend to come with a higher price tag. An additional barrier to acceptance are issues with visas and how the medical residency program in the United States is run. The visa issue can come into play as some countries require their students to return back to their home country and then reapply for the visa, as they have to convert it from a student visa over to an employment visa. Because as you participate in the residency program, that becomes an employment and a job versus a student sort of category. And depending on the political climate, both abroad and here in the United States, that can sometimes be tricky. And so sometimes medical schools tend to be very conservative. And so sometimes it's just not an arena that they want to really get too heavily involved in. Additionally, the U.S. residency program is funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars. So again, a political environment exists that causes some tension. However, there are some privately funded residency programs that hospitals sponsor themselves, and those are very those private residency placements don't have the U.S. federal dollars attached to them, and so the hospitals are paying for them themselves, and so it's more to the hospital's discretion about who they want to hire in those positions, and they tend to be very international friendly. So there's two sort of very significant barriers that international students face, but that doesn't mean that international students don't receive medical education in the United States. And so one of the ways that one of the paths that international students will take is applying to medical school via an MD PhD program. These programs combine a medical school education with a research-based academic doctoral program. These programs typically are longer. They take about 7 years to complete after completing your undergraduate education. However, international students can be successful as PhD programs typically provide funding, so they give you the tuition dollars, and they also provide advocacy to medical programs to accept the international applicant. These programs vary a little in how students complete the MD PhD program. However, a typical setup is that students accepted into the MD PhD program will spend their first 2 years predominantly taking medical school courses. After the first 2 years, they will then switch and start completing their PhD work. They'll basically kind of put medical school on pause and then go over to the research area and complete their PhD work. That PhD work typically takes between 3 and 4 years. Then after they've completed most of their doctoral research work, the student will then re-engage in the medical school portion, typically during the clinical years, and then complete both. They would end up graduating at the same time with both their MD degree and their PhD. Obviously, for this route, students need to be academically strong and have a very strong interest in research. But research isn't necessarily for everyone. And so some students take another alternative pathway, and this is through taking glide or gap years. You may already be familiar with the term. Instead of being from secondary school to university, instead this time we're taking the gap years between university and medical school. And during this time, students are able to remain in the United States and pursue other interests. These usually involve employment in order to keep the visa active, but usually students typically take employment in some field related to the sciences. During this time, the students are able to hone their skills, increase their healthcare experiences, and a lot of students will actually apply for permanent residency or US citizenship. Taking glide years is becoming increasingly common, not only for international students, but domestic students as well. In fact, the majority of incoming medical students typically have 1 to 2 years of gap time between completing their bachelor's degree and when they go ahead and begin medical training. Another alternative pathway is non-US medical schools. Depending on the student and their goals, it is possible for students to become physicians by attending a medical school outside of the United States. There are many US-style medical programs around the world that train physicians with the same high-quality standards as here in the United States. Some students are able to then obtain residencies in the United States, while others decide to practice somewhere else in the world or even back in their home countries. One very popular option is UK medical schools. Now, the medical schools in the United Kingdom run a little bit differently than the traditional US model. In the United Kingdom, most students typically go on to medical school after completing secondary education. So there's actually no bachelor's degree involved. However, there are programs in the UK for graduate entry that allow students who study in the US or any other country and earn a bachelor's degree to kind of jump into the medical school curriculum in the UK. Each year, students are able to, when students apply to UK medical schools, they're only allowed to apply to 5 schools per year. And each school differs slightly on which entrance exam they may require. Most schools do require the UCAT in the United Kingdom, which is less of a subjective test and tests the student more on how they think, how they speak, how they write, and their decision making. It's often referred to as a situational judgment test. Other schools will also ask for a more specific subjective test, which is going to test the subjects like biology and chemistry and biochemistry. These usually come in the form of the BMAT or the GMA SAT, and it varies between schools which test exam that they'll accept. The BMAT and the GAM SAT are very similar to the MCAT in the United States. Another alternative pathway that students can consider is outside of the medical school box. There are a wide variety of career paths that are related to medicine that are much more international friendly in their acceptances. So depending on the student's interests and goals, there may be a career path that suits them that doesn't necessarily have the acceptance barriers that medicine does. Dentistry, for example, is more international friendly than medicine as it does not have a residency requirement following after dental school. However, some dental schools do have financial requirements of payment upfront. Pharmacy schools, nursing programs, and podiatry schools are also incredibly international friendly and still provide students with an avenue to have a healthcare career that is just as rewarding as a career in medicine. And I'm going to highlight a few of these in the next couple of slides. So for dentistry, currently we have about 6,100 seats in dental schools in the United States. We do have an international enrollment of about a little over 4%. It varies between 4 to 5% every year. The mean GPAs required for dentistry are slightly lower than medicine, and they take an exam called the DAT, the Dental Aptitude Test. It requires, again, 4 years of study, very similar to medicine, and there are 10 different specialty areas that students can pursue. And those range in areas from just general practice to orthodontics to oral and maxillofacial surgery, pediatrics, radiology, oral pathology. So there's lots of different things that students can go into if they choose to. Dentists can practice in the United States after 4 years of dental school. You can, unless if you're just going into general practice. If you want to go into something more specialized, there would be additional years of dental school after that to get those specific specialties under your belt. Another excellent option for international students to consider is optometry. Optometry specializes in diseases of vision and the eye. Optometrists form close relationships with patients, usually following them throughout their lives. Optometry schools have a high overall acceptance rate of over 70%. And they provide the opportunity for students to, also similar to dentistry, have independent business ownership after graduation. Students can elect to specialize in a variety of areas and can even perform eye surgery in some parts of the United States. Pharmacists are quickly expanding their role in healthcare and are becoming very involved, particularly in primary care in some areas of the United States. Pharmacists are sometimes the frontline healthcare providers for patients that can assist with diagnosis and even provide vaccinations to the public. And so pharmacy is definitely a growing area, and it is incredibly international friendly. Another option for students that I want to highlight is podiatry. Podiatrists are physicians who specialize in the foot and ankle. They work with a variety of patients, from young children all the way up to our senior citizens. They even perform surgery and are closely tied to hospitals. And so this is a great alternative for students who are interested in surgery or sort of in sports medicine or orthopedics. So how do students then prepare for professional school? So most pre-health programs follow a similar path for preparation, very similar academic coursework requirements, very similar sort of extracurricular involvements. So what are some of the things that students do to help prepare them and help them make them stand out? So they come down to two different categories. The first is academics. Students need to be strong academically. They need to do well in their courses and earn a high GPA. This is even more true for international applicants to US medical schools. The typical cumulative GPA for an accepted international student is currently about a 3.85 on a 4.0 scale. They also tend to score in the 90th percentile or better on the MCAT exam. In addition to efforts in the classroom, competitive international applicants tend to be heavily involved in research efforts during their undergraduate careers. And this goes back to that sort of MD, PhD track for students. Even if an international student doesn't intend to pursue an MD, PhD, they need to prepare in a similar manner. Additionally, students need to demonstrate some of the core competencies of healthcare. These include excellent interpersonal skills. So how do you, your service, your social awareness, cultural appreciation, how do you work with other people? Intrapersonal skills, so this comes down to your ethics, your resilience, and your adaptability. And then thinking and reasoning skills. So how do you attack a problem? How do you do problem solving and think critically about various issues facing healthcare and even personal struggles? These things are demonstrated through involvement within your local community and campus involvement, in addition to sort of your classroom activities. I'm often asked what the best major is for a pre-med student. To be honest, The answer is any major you enjoy. Yes, many pre-med students are major in biology. However, medicine is more than just biology, and medical schools look for students that come from a wide variety of backgrounds. I encourage all of my students to major in something they enjoy and something they want to learn more about. Many majors provide flexibility for students to complete the prerequisite coursework for medical school. Even a history major can take biochemistry. By finding a major that you enjoy, you will be more successful and you will enjoy your college experience that much more. So take the time to explore your interests and find a major that speaks to you. So let me jump back then to those core competencies that I had mentioned before. How do you demonstrate those sort of softer skills in your medical school application? And this is done through telling your story. Medical schools want to know who their applicants are as human beings. They can look at a transcript and know how you are as a student, but they want to know what's behind those grades and sort of what are the things that are motivating you towards a career in medicine. And you do this by telling your story. You have ample opportunity in the application to show medical schools who you are through a wide variety of the requirements. You gain the competencies needed through extracurricular engagement, and you let medical schools know about that through essays you write, both in the primary and the secondary applications, through your personal statement. Others will comment on your abilities around the core competencies because you need to request a variety of letters of recommendation. And these will come from faculty or community members that you've interacted with. And again, hopefully you get to interview with medical schools and you can demonstrate your personality and tell your story to faculty at the medical school and admissions counselors. Students need to be confident in their stories and demonstrate why they do the things they do and what motivates them for a career in medicine. Medical schools are not interested in robots. They want students who have reflected on their experiences and don't just do things to look good on their resumes. They want students who want to serve others because they have a whole heart to do that and not because they think it will just look good. So what does this all look like in the end? When students start university in the United States, they're usually very excited about the prospect of becoming a physician. And this process is very overwhelming and has a lot of moving parts. This is where people like me come into play. In the first and second year of undergraduate education, this is when I encourage students to focus on cultivating their story. Find activities and organizations to become involved with both on campus and within the community that they're interested in. So if a student wants to be a pediatrician and work with children, I encourage them to get involved within the local town that their college or university is in and get involved with children's activities, whether it's at doing tutoring at a community center, or if you have an interest in sports and like to play football, for example, become a youth coach for a football team and get experience being around children and especially their parents. We also begin working on making sure that students set up a solid academic foundation in their first 2 years. During the third and fourth year of undergraduate education is when we really start to get into the nitty gritty of the application. And I sort of laid out a little timeline here for you to kind of show you all the steps involved. And this is designed as if the student is planning to start medical school immediately after graduation from university. This is a multi-step process for students, and it typically takes about 2 years to complete that application. I also remind students this is not a marathon, this is a marathon and not a sprint. You will be completing a lot of things over a long period of time, and you just can't be rushed, and students need to take their time with this. So in summary, international students do face unique challenges when it comes to medical education in the United States. Not to say they cannot be overcome, but students need to be aware of these challenges so that they can make a plan to overcome. Students need to make a plan for the financial piece. They need to be open and honest with their families about the costs involved. International students also need to be aware that gaining acceptance into US medical school is going to be an uphill battle. They need to prepare themselves academically, personally, and professionally to make themselves stand out and be noticed. Students also need to know that there are alternative career paths. They can still be a doctor if the title is that important to them. They would just specialize in something else, teeth, eyes, feet, or other things. These healthcare related fields are much more open to international applicants. And if the student is open to learning, it can open up a whole new world for them. However, those fields aren't for everyone. For some, medicine is the only path for them. For those students, the onus is on you to become the best candidate for medical school that you can be. You need to set yourself up for success, both inside and outside the classroom, and get involved within the community, both your on-campus community, both at home when you go home for breaks, and in the town or city that your university is located in. That you need to advocate for yourself to get the opportunities that you need to be successful. And remember, this is a long journey. Reach out to the resources available to you, your family, tutoring centers on campus if you start to struggle academically, advisors, faculty advisors, research advisors. Most institutions also have a pre-health office that has advisors there to help you. Planning is going to be key. Think ahead about what you are going to face and make a plan for how you can get through it. This may be a little bit bumpy along the way than some of your domestic counterparts, but if you put a plan together and you execute it in the right way, you can do it. So I just want to say thank you very much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed sharing some of this information with you. So I'll take a second to look at the chat and the Q&A. There is my email address. So it's huntp@juniata.edu, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Patricia, ma'am. You have covered almost everything in the presentation. It was a great session, and I'm sure it would have benefited all the participants who are watching this right now, who are taking part. So you have shared your mail ID also. So the answer, like the questions that there are a lot of questions coming up on the Q&A feature. If there are any questions that we can't take up during the session, please feel free to reach out to Patricia, ma'am, through her mail ID. So, ma'am, there are a few questions we have over here. Is MCAT the only test? Attendee has asked, is MCAT the only test you would need to take for medical studies?
Yes. So in the United States, the MCAT is required by I only know of one medical school that will look at an SAT score if an MCAT score is not available. I have a feeling that was a COVID change, but I think they're sort of keeping the language. But for every other medical school, yes, an MCAT is required in most cases.
All right. Moving on to the next question, ma'am. How would you recommend that students prepare? Is there a particular syllabus that they have to follow, or do they just need to study what they're planning to specialize in?
Yeah, so I encourage students, whenever they start university, to reach out to their advisors. There is a specific set of prerequisite courses that students typically take. It involves some biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, some social sciences, some English composition courses, and there's a specific set. Each school has little nuances though. So for example, the State University of New York Medical School requires a literature course. It's unique to them. And so there are some things that students can look up. The schools are very open about what their prerequisite courses are. And if the student works with their academic advisor and or pre-health advisor, they will set them up with exactly what they need to know for where the particular medical schools that they're most interested in.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, you mentioned about some courses which students can take up other than medicine. When it comes to degrees, there are which are the degrees that are available to students in the medical field itself if they are looking at undergrad studies?
Probably, a vast majority of pre-medical students do major in biology, chemistry, or biochemistry. Those three areas probably is 3/4 of the students who end up matriculating to medical school. However, I've worked with students who are history majors, philosophy majors, and even education majors who have decided that they want to pursue medical school, but they also have these other interests. And in fact, one of my students last year was a history major, and he was accepted to 6 different medical schools. And so he got to really choose where he wanted to go because he had lots of options. Not to say that he's the norm, he's not the norm. But, I tell students, major in something that interests you. If you're interested in the brain and how people behave, maybe psychology is more appropriate for you. If you're really interested in, like immunology and viruses and bacteria, maybe majoring in microbiology is a better fit for you than a traditional biology program. A lot of my pre-meds, they come in and they're like, I want to study biology. And I'm like, okay. And then we get to that plant science ecology requirement. And they're like, but I don't want to take ecology. Like, I don't care about plants. Well, biology is the study of all living things. So in order for you to have a biology major, you're going to have to take courses in evolution and ecology and plant science and maybe fisheries and or an aviary class or something like that. So, students have to be open to everything that their major entails. And if it's not right for you, then find something that is right for you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. With that, we come to the end of the session. Thanks for taking up these many questions and almost covering everything that we were looking forward to. Ma'am, could you please share your mail ID on the chat so that students can reach out to you if they have any more doubts and queries? Also, ma'am, before we close the session, any final piece of advice you would like to give to our students, to our aspiring medical students?
I think the best piece of advice is to be reflective about who you are and what you want out of your university education. You can get to where you want to be.
It's a great piece of advice, ma'am.
It's short and sweet.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, one more question. I think a question suddenly popped up. The last question for the day. Is it possible to do a double majors in a medical college?
Yes. So that's going to depend on your college or university. At my institution, it's very easy for students to double major because our academic programs provide a lot of flexibility to students. Other institutions may have more prescriptive type majors where they dictate a lot more of the course requirements for you, and you may not have as much flexibility. So it's really going to vary from university to university.
Great, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. So please feel free to reach out to ma'am if you have any more doubts. And ma'am, please share your mail ID with our students who are a part of this webinar series. And once again, thank you so much. And it's time for us to start the next session. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar series.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you, Patricia, for joining for this session. We are now ready for the final session for this day. And in the final session, you are going to listen to 2 students. You're going to listen to advice of 2 students who one of them got into a BS plus MD program at Tulane. And the second one is studying bioinformatics at Juniata College. So you're going to listen to 2 very different kind of experiences. And in the next couple of minutes, we're going to, so I interviewed both these students and I asked them lots of questions about how they got in, what was the application process like, what was their interview like. And I have the recording with us today. So we are going to run you through the recording. And following that, this is how the day is going to end. And then we look forward to having all of you back again tomorrow, where we get 7 to 8 colleges from across the world. We have New Zealand, UK, US, and we invite you to learn more about those colleges as they share about their application process. They share about their how does the medicine program work at their colleges. So, and while you're doing that, one final reminder that check out our YouTube channel and our Instagram account. They are some fantastic resources for you. YouTube is a place where you can get so much information about colleges, about admissions, and it's really a fantastic place to sort of learn a lot, and this will really help you in your application journey. We have got playlist on what to study at college. So there are a lot of videos, about 20-30 videos on the different programs, different academic programs. Then another playlist on how a student got into Caltech, UPenn, Cambridge, Oxford kind of colleges. So I encourage all of you to check out our YouTube channel and subscribe to it. And same goes for our Instagram account, which again is a wonderful resource for all of you. So with that, we are now towards the final session of this evening, and I invite Shivesh to just go ahead and resume the interview. Let's see how the two students sort of interviewed, and let's hear their experiences as they got into some of the most selective programs at a college. So joining us for this session, we have Lake Parekh from Dhirubhai Ambani International School. Lake just graduated from the school, and he is now going to Tulane to study a BS MD program. The video is not visible. To have you with us here today, Lake.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
I think
hi,
you just
good
stop
evening.
playing
My
and
name
then
is
try
Lake
again
Parekh,
once,
and I'm
please.
a freshman.
So joining us for this session, we have Lake Parekh from Dhirubhai Ambani International. No, still can't see the video. Just a moment, everyone. We are just facing some technical difficulties. In a moment, we'll be here with you. Joining us for this session, we have Lake Parekh from Dhirubhai Ambani International School. Lake just graduated from the school, and he is now going to Tulane to study a BS MD program. It's a pleasure to have you with us here today, Lake.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. Hi, good evening. My name is Lake Parekh, and I'm a freshman at Tulane University. And I am in the TAP-TP Accelerated BSMD program. And my college major for that program will be cellular and molecular biology.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lake, for introducing yourself and for telling us about your planned major. BSMD, yeah, that's a unique program. So what is actually a BSMD program?
So, like the name suggests, it's a combined BS and MD program, which is a combined undergraduate and graduate program. Meaning that if you are offered a place in this particular program, it means that one has been offered a place into these schools, undergraduate and graduate schools. So the BS is the undergraduate degree that you'll receive, and the MD is the the graduate degree that you receive from the med school. So what makes this program unique and attractive to aspiring med students is the fact that even before you begin your undergraduate studies, you're being offered a place into a school's med school, which especially for international students, the acceptance rate is anyway pretty low. So that's why it's one of the most highly competitive programs in the entire United States.
Okay, so Lake, you might have made a list of colleges that you thought you'd apply to,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Uh, would you like to mention some of those names, which all colleges were on your
Sure.
list? Yeah.
So I'll get to my list in a second, but if you just Google up the list of BSMD programs in the world, in the United States, there is a college-wide list that has a comprehensive list, but uh, not all of the programs accept international students. So if at all you are an international student and want to know if that program accepts international students, I would like the best option would be to email the program head at the BSMD, the BSMD program head, and that way you can get a straightforward answer as to whether or not you should consider that college. And even if they do accept international kids, you're on the BSMD program has radar, so it's a win-win situation anyway. And as Neeraj always said, it's good demonstrated interest.
Okay.
And so some of the colleges I had on my list were Brown University, Case Western, Tulane, Rochester, and BU.
Okay. So Rochester, Tulane, Case Western, Brown, and
and uh, BU.
BU. Fantastic.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that's great, Lake. So you just mentioned that these programs are very selective. And would you like to help us gain an understanding of how selective they really are? If you have some numbers with you.
Well, I have the numbers, but they're not very motivating. So in Tulane, in my program, out of the applicant pool of around like 2,000 kids, there were 8 seats available.
Wow.
And in Case Western, the one I got rejected from, there were 1,700 kids who applied and 11 got the program. And
Wow.
Brown is maybe like a 1.5 acceptance rate. So and it's different really. It's really
Wow.
difficult.
So that means Lake, that's fantastic. I mean, that's a highly selective program. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
So Lake, now my next question to you is the structure of a BSMD program.
Right.
It's a 8-year program, is it?
So a typical BSMD program is 8 years. Yes, it's the 4 years of a normal undergrad followed by 4 years of med school. But what's different is the option of the MCAT. So the MCAT is the standardized entrance test for med school in the United States. And if enrolled in a BSMD program, most universities don't require to give you don't require you to give the MCAT at all. So which is extremely attractive to med students because you spend almost the entire of your third year and half of your fourth year just studying for that exam and finalizing your applications to different med schools. So if you have the MCAT out of the way, it gives you space for just a better college life towards the end. And in my case, it's an accelerated med program. So I will finish my undergrad in 3 years and then I'll join Tulane Med School in my fourth year. So instead of 8 years, I'll be completing my MD degree in 7 years. Yeah, so
Okay.
I think even BU is accelerated, but the others are 8 years, the ones I applied to at least.
Okay. Perfect. And so what were some of the factors that you considered while selecting the program and selecting the universities that you did?
So I think the process is the same for just whichever colleges you select, whatever the process that Neeraj sir has told us over the years of how to choose your colleges. So the basic factors are the same, but the specific med factors I looked at, like now I had to move my focus from not just their undergraduate schools, but also to their med schools and see how good they were, not the research facilities, the staff and the faculty there. So yeah, you have to like kind of shift your focus back to the med school as well, and then because it's a long-term investment and a long-term program. So, and if you're going to be staying at one university for 8 years, you should know that you're going to be completely happy there, because otherwise there's no point of going there at all. And yeah, I think that was about it.
Okay, so first is research the program,
Right.
know more about university, right?
Mhm.
And then somewhere earlier you also said that to be accepted, you need to demonstrate the interest, right?
Right, for sure, for sure. Because it's such a competitive program. There's a long list of names, and usually the BSMD committee is entirely separate from your admission committee. So it goes because here it's a med school program as well. So your application, your undergraduate application, goes to the med school as well. So to be attractive to a med school admission officer, your application should also be tailored a certain way. So that's what was going to be my biggest advice to anyone who planning to apply to BSMD programs. The application is usually separate. I'll get to that in a second. But try in especially the BSMD program essays or the interviews, try to be more objective than creative and quirky, because they're looking for future doctors. Like, it's always good to be unique
Yeah,
and creative, but they're looking for future doctors, and future doctors have to be objective, and yeah, they should just be straightforward
wonderful.
and not.
Super, Blake. So that gives us a good idea of why you selected it. Now, do tell us a little bit about the application process. How did the whole application process look
Right.
like for you?
So, because it's a relatively unheard of program and a highly selective program, you do have to write separate essays for it. So the option will either be in the Common App, like BU was in the Common App, but the others like Brown, Case Western, Rochester, Tulane had essays outside of Common App. So you had to write the emails and submit it write the essays and submit it via email or through their portal directly. So it's different for every university, and you should be on top of that. Neeraj's team helps you quite a bit with that. Um, but so basically, the first round, as always, is the essays, and after that, in my case, there was an interview. And in the interview, it's not just an admission officer, it's not just a student alum, but I actually had doctors from the School of Medicine in the interview with me. So you're actually presenting in front of the Dean of Admissions of Tulane Med School and doctors who are working and teaching there. So, like I said, you have to be like objective and know your medical stuff, because this is a graduate program, not an undergraduate program. You're supposed to have some prior knowledge of what you want to do in the future.
Okay, so there is Common App. There are the regular
Mhm.
letter of recommendations, right?
Right.
Then there is the regular essays that you have to submit. Then there
Mhm.
is an additional BSMD application, is it? Within Common App?
Uh, Not within Common App. So sometimes, like BU, there's an option in one of the special fields that would you like to apply for this
Yeah.
program. So if you selected like a couple, I think 3 essays pop down, which you have to write. So yeah,
Okay.
it's definitely more essays, it's definitely more work. But yeah, otherwise you get access to these essays from the portal, from the student applicant portal, or you just find it on their website and they ask you to email it to a particular person.
Okay, perfect. So for you, it was there in Common App. Like you had to select for Tulane, it was an option within Common App that you had to say that.
No, so for Tulane, no, I went online, I looked it up on their website, and for Tulane, I had to write it on a separate Word doc, and then I had to email it to the Dean of Admissions of Med School. So then he responded to me. Like, there was no Common App involved in that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so uh, Lake, with that, we are coming towards the end of this conversation. I would
Mhm.
like to ask you what is an advice, once again, that you would like to share with these students who might
Mhm.
be looking at BSMD programs in the US?
Right. Like, yeah, my main advice would be to be objective, especially in the BSMD programs, and I would say be knowledgeable about your med school stuff. Like, don't know the med school as well as the undergraduate school, not just the undergraduate school, because you're applying to the med school right now as well. So do thorough research on the med school, and yeah, just be knowledgeable about certain things coming up in medicine right now, research and innovation, because that was one of the things I was asked in my interview as well, about just like what's the most recent medical news you heard. So it's good to stay in touch with your potential future field. And yeah, just if your primary focus is going to be the BSMD program at a university, then maybe you can tailor your application slightly more towards the medical side instead of just a general side. So you can always, again, now if you're in the 9 to 10, you can definitely, you have the time now to get in some job shadowing or internship opportunities at hospitals. So yeah, try to tailor your resume and your common app more towards a medical field.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lake, for sharing all that information with us. I do have a couple more questions that the
Sure,
students
sure.
would like to know. Question number one is, you mentioned that there was an interview, right? So can
Right.
you tell us a little more about what were the kind of questions that you were asked
Sure.
during the interview? And again, did you interview with Case Western or another one of your colleges as well? Or did you?
Mm, okay. Okay, no, so I interviewed only with Tulane because you have to get through 2, 3 rounds before each of them. So I didn't get through to the interview round for Case. But for Tulane, like the main question they'll ask you in every single BSMD interview is, why do you want to be a doctor? So I racked my brain for so long. Even Neeraj sir and I, we spent a good like an hour and a half just figuring and nailing down that question. So that is going to be a staple in all interviews. And like I said, like these interviews are also with doctors who aren't part of the admission committee. They're just doctors at Tulane Medical School. So one of the doctors um, had asked, like in one of my essays, I wrote about stand-up comedy, and my like the doctor who was also in the interview, he said I do a little bit of stand-up myself. So in like a half an hour interview, he told me to do 7.5 minutes of stand-up. So
Wow.
they're entirely random, and the thing is, like, it's not just admission. It's not just the people who are in the admission committee. So you're not going to get the classic admission question like, "Why do you want to go to this school? What classes are you excited to attend?" So it can be entirely random. And I said, like, they asked me about what's the most recent medical news you heard. So be knowledgeable about it and just be open, be objective, and yeah, don't try to have a script next to you because they can figure out when you're reading. So yeah, that's
Okay.
about it.
Okay, that's great. Another question, Lake, for you is there might be different concentrations within the BSMD program, right?
Right.
Uh, so are you required to select that concentration right away or after a couple of years or only when you join the medical school?
No, so that is so if you're talking about undergraduate major, I can only take cellular and molecular biology. And I think that's the case in most PSMD programs as well. Because uh, if they want you to do medicine in the future and they want you to complete undergrad in 4 years and quicker and like then be able to focus entirely on med school, they want you to like primarily focus on one thing. Like you can still explore different classes, but your major should just be like it's usually just biology. And yeah, especially mine's accelerated, so they rely on high school credit and just a cellular molecular biology major and no double majors to be able to make sure that I finish in 3 years.
Okay. And my final question to you is, Lake, would you like to share what your Common App essay was all about?
Oh, my common app essay. My common app essay was about like primarily about neo-colonialism, and wrote it as a story of an Indian. I basically reversed the fact that the British invaded India, and I started my essay talking about how what would have happened if India would have invaded Britain, and then I ended with like how India is still colonialized by the British. Yeah,
Oh, that's wonderful, Lake. And did you also do some internships or some sort of job shadowing of doctors or
yeah.
something like that?
hmm I had a lot of job shadowing experience because both my parents are doctors, so I was able to I had better access to those opportunities. So yeah, I had job shadowing and internship experiences with doctors. So and I think that's what pushed me in the direction of medicine as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great. Lake, anything else about your profile that you would like to share with the students that you think would help make them a strong application for a program like the one you are doing?
Um, my answer would be just the generic. Try doing research, but like step it up a notch and maybe try to do it with a doctor if you can, so I was able to, I had the opportunity to do psychological research with a psychiatrist, and I think that definitely helped me not only in my application process, but also she basically helped refine my research skills, and this made me much more of an intuitive thinker, especially when it comes to medical research. So research is definitely a very attractive thing to admission officers and to the med school now as well, because they want especially Tulane Medical School, and honestly all these top medical schools that you can consider applying to, they all are often invested a lot in research, and if the student shows promising signs of research right from the undergraduate level, it can always be helpful.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Lake, for sharing all that information with us, for sharing so much about your profile, about the research that you did, and for guiding these students who are watching this video. It was a pleasure having you here on this call today. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Good day. So joining us for the second session, we have Mansi Chandra. Mansi is studying bioinformatics at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. So you just heard Lake Parekh. Lake is studying BS plus MD at Tulane University, and now Mansi is in her sophomore year at Juniata. So she just completed her first year. And a little bit about Mansi went to DPS in Lucknow, Delhi Public School, Lucknow, and then she went on to win a full tuition scholarship and is now studying bioinformatics at Juniata College. So, Mansi, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for joining us for this session. Would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hello, so I'm Mansi. As Devesh told, I'm from Lucknow, and I applied to Next Genius, and I'm a full tuition scholar to Juniata College for the class of 2024. I'm a rising sophomore. I came here last semester, and I'm majoring in my individualized POE at Juniata College. That is bioinformatics. Individualized POE means I created my own major according to my interest of courses, which I think would help me in the future.
Fantastic, Mansi. So do tell us a little bit about bioinformatics, what bioinformatics is, and how did you create this major for yourself?
So I was never interested in like conventional like biology, like studying botany and zoology. I don't like it. So I wasn't even aware like a field of bioinformatics exists. I came here for like pre-med, but then when I got into research, I found bioinformatics more according to my interest, because it had like, you can do maths and like a little bit of computers, data analysis, data science, which I think is really cool because you're not sticking to one particular subject. You cover a variety of fields, a variety of subjects. And also bioinformatics is a really budding field nowadays in biology, which a lot of people are not aware. So what I love most about bioinformatics is the vast array of fields and subjects and courses it covers. It just does not limit you to one particular subject, as in biology or just chemistry. So I just love that aspect of this major, which I created.
That's wonderful, Mansi. And I would also share with you that I am also a bioinformatics major, and I really enjoyed my 4 years at college learning about so many things in the field of bioinformatics. So, Mansi, with that, do also let us know about how are your 4 years going to be structured. So you just finished your first year now, your second year, the sophomore, the junior, and the senior year. What are the academic subjects that you will take in these 4 years? Can you give us a general idea of that?
So as I told you, I created my own major. It's my individualized POE. So definitely I'll be taking courses according to what I want to. But like my first year at Juniata was kind of general, like studying bio 101, chemistry 101, and like doing some freshman courses. So it was general, but like now when I'm a rising sophomore, my next 3 years, I would like I created a plan. So I'm just planning to take courses, which I think would be important for me when I would be applying to grad schools. And also, since I'm studying at Janiata, so we have general education requirements. So it's not like I'll just be studying like hardcore sciences, but I'll be studying like sociology and other subjects and other courses because you need general education requirements to graduate. So it's not that I'm studying only hardcore sciences. But yeah, definitely my plan is like the second year would be like a little bit of computers because I don't have a computer background. So maybe a little bit of Python and like some other computer programming languages that I think would be important for me. And then since I do not have a math background as well, a little bit of math as well and data science. And because I studied bio and chemistry in like my high school, I have a really strong base, like foundation for biology and chemistry. So yeah, definitely my next 3 years are like, I know I'm taking really hardcore sciences, but then again, especially at Juniata, I think you just not have to limit yourself to your subject, but you also are pushing yourself to take other courses like creative expression, creative writing, sociology, psychology. So this is what like my next 3 years would look like, a combination of like different courses and subjects, which I don't even know like which all other courses I would be taking.
Superb. So, of course, I think that's great, Mansi, that you've designed your own major at Juniata, and that Juniata and other liberal arts colleges also offer you that opportunity to sort of first explore, but then at the same time create something new, create something that where your interest lies, right? So, as you were mentioning, bioinformatics is a combination of bio plus computer science plus math. So it's a way where all these three fields merge, and it involves a lot of data analytics and a lot of bio using softwares or using mathematical and IT tools to solve bio or problems related to biology, right? So that's
Yeah.
wonderful, Mansi. Now, let us know a little bit about your application to Juniata as well. How did you apply? What was the process like? Things like that.
Yeah, it was not very hectic or difficult. It was pretty simple and straightforward. So I definitely applied to Next Genius because I'm a Next Genius scholar. But like being more specific, you need to fill out a common app application. So just select your college of preference. I selected Juniata in my case. And you just have to like be very specific in what you're like filling. Just don't write anything which you feel like is not relevant for your application. Yeah, I guess you have a common app application and then you have a college specific application as well. So I would say just be honest in that application and just try to meet the deadlines. I guess that's it. It's not very difficult. It's pretty straightforward. The questions are like not out of the world. They're pretty direct. So yeah.
Okay, so it's Common App, your statement of purpose, or what you say, the Common App main essay. Then there's a college-specific application within Common App. So when you apply to the US, and this is for the students, when you apply to the US, of course, you need to submit your Common App. Then there are letter of recommendation that is required. Your teachers need to submit your transcripts, that is your mark sheets from grade 9 to grade 12. And if you have taken SAT or ACT, you need to submit those scores as well. And if you have, some colleges also expect that you submit your English proficiency test, which is in most cases, a lot of Next Genius students submit their Duolingo English test. And finally, there are some financial paperwork that are to be done. So that's what I think Mansi also just shared, that she went through this whole process. And eventually now she's pursuing her undergraduate in Juniata College, where she's now in the second year. So Mansi, thank you for sharing all this information. I have one more question for you, and that is, these students who are going to watch or listen this, they are in their high school right now, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12. So what is an advice that you would like to share with these students when they think of applying to college? And a majority of them are also pursuing bio in their high school, and that's why they are in this session, because this is an event on studying medicine abroad, right? So they are also pursuing bio. And since you are passionate about this, tell us a little bit about what should they be thinking about, or what is an advice that you'd like to give to them?
Yeah, like firstly, studying bio, I like thought like medicine is the only field where like you have other fields as well, firstly. So the best thing about applying to colleges, especially liberal arts colleges in the US, is you really push yourself. You go into research, you do stuff, and then you realize like, okay, maybe I'm not interested in this. Maybe I'm interested in this. This is what happened with me. I came in as pre-med. I switched to bioinformatics in just like a semester because I went to research and I was like, no, I cannot do that. This is the right field for me. So you're in high school, you might think that, okay, this is the right thing. But the best thing about applying here is that you will actually realize that maybe you're not interested in this, but you're interested in something else. So you'll actually realize your potential and your actual interest, because you're not just sticking to one subject here, but like a variety of courses. You're trying things that you haven't in your high school. And that is why you might be forced to be interested in something which you did not think you would be interested in. So, and secondly, when you're applying here, when you're looking at colleges, like I was an ex-genius mentor, I always told this to my mentees as well, that never look at the college title or name. Like, it's not important that you're going to a very huge college. Like, it's good you're going to a huge college, but it's really not the deciding factor, trust me. What matters is if you're getting to study what you really want to do, if you're getting to do what you like, okay, so apart from academics, what other extracurricular activities, clubs, organizations you can be a part of? Like if you go to a college and you get a good coursework, but you couldn't be a part of anything else apart from that, that would not be good. So yeah, definitely don't go for just the name tag and the location. I know there are colleges, huge colleges in New York City, but like there are good colleges in like rural areas like Huntington. Like I love Juniata, although it's in a rural like setting, but I really love it. So yeah, the most important piece of advice to these applicants is that when you're looking for the colleges, just don't go for the name or the location. Look for what you want to study, what you want to do. If you are a perfect fit for that college, and if that college is a perfect fit for you, that is what we were taught and we always thought of when we were applying to Next Genius. And that was what I thought when I was applying to Juniata as well. So yeah, just keep that in mind and you should be good.
Fantastic. That's really an amazing piece of advice, Mansi. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, students, look beyond the names, look at the experience that you want to have at college. Look, what do you want to study at college, and that's when you should go ahead and select the college and sort of create that kind of a college list, right? So wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all that information, Mansi, and thank you for joining this session. It was a pleasure having you here and connecting with you once again, and learning about your experience at Juniata. All the best for your next couple of years, next 3 years at Juniata.
Thank you so much.
So that brings us to the end of day 1 of the Study Medicine Abroad Fair. Thank you to all the students and parents and educators for joining us on this day. And tomorrow we have 8 universities who are going to come and talk about themselves and sort of share their programs with you, share about their admissions process. So I invite all of you to join us for the day tomorrow and learn about all these universities, ask them questions, learn about their admissions process and everything. And once again, I would just remind you to check out our YouTube channel, an amazing resource for all of you. Just go and visit the link. We'll just put that in the chat box. So just subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out our Instagram account, has some wonderful resources for you, and join us tomorrow for this chance to meet these universities and ask them questions. With that, I would call the day 1 close. And thank you once again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening at 4 p.m. India time. Have a great evening. Bye.